This girl went up to her coworker to ask him on a date, but Joo Hyuk's boss interfered and said he wanted to go too. In reality, Joo Hyuk couldn't go because he has to work overtime to finish the work. In that case, only the two of them should go. The girl then refused. She wasn't interested in the boss. She isn't that kind of girl. Joo Hyuk was trembling in his chair. This isn't the first time his boss disturbs him. Earlier, Joo Hyuk was working when his superior threw a paper ball at him. And it wasn't just one. He wiped his nose and said there wasn't a trash can nearby, so Joo Hyuk should throw it in his trash can. Joo Hyuk was furious, so he filed an anonymous complaint on the company website. My boss is a damn bastard and is pushing his work on me all week. Now he is wiping his nose and throwing the dirty paper at me. The protagonist hides the secret that nobody knows. The truth is that he is an ex-military man who was kicked out for being too violent. Now he tries to live a normal life and avoid breaking the bones of everyone in his path, while convincing himself not to destroy his boss. Joo Hyuk's glasses emitted a strange alert. His brain has been synchronized with the equipment. These glasses are connected to his brain. If he stays without the glasses for more than 60 seconds, an electric shock will fry his head. Later, his boss came to him to give more ridiculous orders. Joo Hyuk fought to control himself. Then the glasses spoke in his head. Kim Joo Hyuk, 28 years old, you received a mission. Then, right after, the glasses scanned the cursed superior and gave a complete information sheet. The new mission is to tell the target, stop swearing. A penalty will be applied if he fails the mission. Time remaining 10 seconds. Joo Hyuk paralyzed. This was all very strange. The counter in his head was saying 4, 3, 2, 1. The protagonist didn't do the mission, so the penalty appeared in front of him, minus 50% loss rate. He didn't understand what that meant, but opened his banking app to check something. Then he noticed that half his money was gone. Furious, he shouted loudly that this was madness. This caught the attention of everyone in the office. Everyone thought this was strange. This guy is always so quiet. His boss heard and asked if those words were for him. Then later the two went to the company rest area. Choi Gyo-hong started poking Joo Hyuk and questioning if he lost his head. If suddenly his subordinate does strange things, he will have problems. Choi then said he hates people like Hyuk, because just because they work out a little they must think they are big shots. Besides, it is annoying how Hyuk acts, makes it look like he is sparing him and not as if he was scared like he should be. Hyuk was determined not to lose control, so he endured silently. But the girl from before appeared and asked if Joo Hyuk was an idiot. That took the protagonist by surprise. Then the girl said people don't need to endure everything silently. She took a voice recorder and showed the recording. Every threat Choi made to Hyuk and how he said he hated him just because he works out and has a strong body. Soo-yeon said Choi needs to apologize to Hyuk and change how he behaves from now on. The man's reaction was to advance on the girl and take the recorder from her hands. It was then that the monster came out of the cage. Joo Hyuk held his boss's arm and stopped him. Choi was furious, but Hyuk was calm. He said that this way Choi will hurt his arm. The system in his glasses alerted, hit a blow on Choi's throat. The man was uncontrolled and was gentle. By attacking Hyuk this way created the perfect situation for him to fight back. Hyuk dodged the punch and gave a subtle caress on his throat. This threw him 3 meters back. Our boy just said that Choi only talks shit, so this will help him stay quiet longer. The girl from before got scared. She didn't expect them to start a fight. Hyuk told her, just pretend you are not seeing anything. The system warned in his glasses, the reward for the mission is 200% profit. When Hyuk looked at his account, his money increased 200%. Choi asked with a hoarse voice if Hyuk went crazy to hit his superior this way. Now the truly true truth was revealed to us. Joo Hyuk accepted all humiliation to keep his job and salary. But if now a system will give him money, he doesn't need to worry about anything else. Scared, Choi said he would show his secret fighting technique. He tried to hit Hyuk, but had no success. That was exciting for our boy. Since he was kicked out of the army, he hadn't fought. Easily he immobilized Choi. His face became as ugly as his personality. Hyuk calmed his boss and said it would end in seconds. His mission was only to put him to sleep a little. So when he lost consciousness and fell face on the ground, the system warned that a new mission was completed. 500% profit. The excitement of earning so much money was electrifying. It was as if he discovered he had 1,000 bitcoins saved and just found out. Once, when the protagonist was interviewed for this job, he was just an individual trying to restart his life and sought something ordinary, like everyone else. Thus, he had no idea of the future that awaited him. As now that these mysterious missions have appeared, he completes the tasks and makes easy money. Where most of the time, the protagonist only needs to do something trivial, like playing a prank on someone or goofing off at work. He spent his last 3 days doing this and collected a total of 580 million wons. Not only that, but he earned enough to live well for the rest of his life. However, as nothing in life is easy, a drone approaches Kim and drops a box for him. His system says he has passed the probation period. Inside the box, Kim finds a ticket. His system alerts him that until now he was only in the tutorial and that from now on, the real missions will arise. Moreover, in the next 7 days he can earn up to 1 billion wons. But if he doesn't earn this amount within the stipulated period, he won't be able to advance to the next stage. And all the money earned until then will be revoked. Kim Joo Hyuk is caught off guard by this news. He wonders how he will make 1 billion in 7 days. On the ticket he received, There is a note stating that this ticket guarantees a loan of 100 million for whoever possesses it. With little information, the protagonist doesn't even know where to start. He thinks it would be good to know where these glasses came from and who is behind this, but he doesn't know where to look for such information. Amidst this, Kim sees his boss and greets him. He says he doesn't see Choi very often and asks him to come to his cubicle before leaving. Choi starts to sweat and thinks that he has been avoiding Kim Joo-hyuk since their last encounter, but now he is caught off guard and doesn't know what to do. Kim then approaches quickly, startling Choi. He tells Choi to answer his question without yelling and asks if he knows the origin of these glasses. Still in shock, Choi says he doesn't know. However, Kim calls him a liar. Desperate, Choi reaffirms that he doesn't know. Then, the protagonist imagines that his boss really doesn't know this information, but asks if Choi has seen anyone with the same glasses. His superior says no, which sounds even stranger to the protagonist, as he wonders why he was the only one chosen. His information is insufficient to draw any conclusions. However, he gets excited to know that he will leave work early today. His mission is to enjoy this extra time and have a little fun. He leaves and tells his boss to take care of everything in his absence. Choi tries to argue that he had plans for tonight, but Kim doesn't want to hear it and takes revenge for all the extra nights of work he had to do. Sometime later, the protagonist arrives at a location still under construction, as directed by his glasses. In this, he asks if he is in the right place. His system alerts him that a game is about to start, and other participants will join him. Kim then asks if there are others in the same situation as him. His system only tells him to go to the briefcase with money. Still confused, the protagonist obeys. When he opens the briefcase, he realizes that his system was not joking. Next, the system says that each participant must keep their briefcase, and anyone who gets robbed will lose the game, as well as the money. But Kim can only think about the amount and the time allotted for the game, which is 30 minutes, as he believes there is no way he can lose. But soon after, some guys with knives show up, wanting to take his briefcase. These tough-looking guys think they are facing an inexperienced rookie. To them, taking the protagonist's briefcase will be an easy task. However, they only think this because they don't know Kim's true nature. Even so, they claim they don't want to spill anyone's blood, so they demand that the protagonist hand over the briefcase before something bad happens. Kim, however, says he has no intention of doing that, and tells them they can try to rob him if they want. With that, the criminals realize that the protagonist is bold, but they don't back down. On the contrary, they become even more excited to play. However, Kim is also excited and says that the only thing the criminals need to do is try to take his money. The guys think the protagonist is just a greedy lunatic who has lost his fear in the face of a large sum of money. However, Kim tells them they have no idea who they are up against. Hearing this makes the gang leader quite angry, to the point of being the first to charge. But as soon as he attacks, Kim defends himself and praises him for his bravery. But he says that he is about to understand the situation he has gotten himself into. With that, Kim prepares to strike, and he hits the opponent with a slap, sending him flying away. The others see this and are left speechless. Kim, for his part, says that with such weak participants, it will be even easier to win this game. Two of the criminals decide to split up and surround the protagonist. Soon, Kim praises them for working as a team. For their part, the guys say they will defeat him, claiming that the protagonist is an arrogant guy. They then attack together, but Kim kicks the ground, raising a cloud of dust, confusing one of the criminals' sense of direction. The other gets angry and intends to take revenge. However, as soon as he attacks the protagonist with his knife, Kim easily dodges the blows, claiming that his enemy doesn't know how to handle a blade. His words make his opponent even angrier. Blinded by rage, he attacks, and believes that the protagonist won't be able to escape this. However, Kim manages to immobilize his opponent, and with a single move, he breaks his blade, leaving him unarmed. The enemy is shocked to see this, and due to his distraction, he becomes an easy target. With a hammer blow to the head, the thug falls unconscious. Kim then says that they were unlucky to face a veteran of the armed forces, but he knows he still has to deal with the other thug. Since the other thug isn't attacking, Kim asks if he wants to talk. The thug is completely lost and doesn't know what to say. Kim then asks if the thug knows who created this game. His opponent says no, that he just received a device that put him in this game. The protagonist notices that his adversary is wearing a watch and not glasses like him, and wonders if that makes any difference. While he is lost in thoughts about this, his enemy thinks he can take advantage of this moment of distraction to win the game. However, Kim quickly approached and caught the thug by surprise. Instead of hitting the protagonist by surprise, it was the thug who met this unfortunate end, and with a single blow, he kissed the ground. But to the protagonist's surprise, the other thug calls his attention, saying that this is no joke, as there are 300 million at stake according to the rules. However, the thug's device says that he lost the game, and that he lost his accumulated amount. Not only that, but his watch says that, due to the defeat, he will be punished. Kim is left confused about what is happening for a second. The man in front of him begs for help. Meanwhile, his entire body has apparently been poisoned, and he falls to the ground shortly after. The protagonist realizes that this seems like some kind of injectable drug, and it was probably the device that administered the poison. He then deduces that his glasses also have this capability, which Kim doesn't think he is prepared for in this situation. However, soon after, someone appears saying that, once inside the game, there is no way to escape. A masked man says that participants enter this to get rich, or leave losing everything they have. There is no other way to end this. They also collect the losing participants. Meanwhile, in the sky, drones observe everything. broadcasting the images to a monitoring center. After all, the participants are puppets in the hands of whoever created this game. Kim thinks that initially this game was easy, but he just realized that it won't be the same from now on. His system informs him that he has passed the initial phase, and the real game begins now. Soon, new participants appear in front of the protagonist. But he doesn't see this as something bad, because, in a way, Kim is having fun. And unlike the others, he is loving the game. In nature, there are predators that hunt other predators. Like, for example, the Siberian tiger, which targets wolves that live in high temperatures and hunt smaller prey. In the same way, there is the protagonist. Kim is a predator of hunters, and he is surrounded by a pack of hungry wolves. Even so, he can only see this situation as a way to level up and doesn't even consider the possibility that it could be dangerous. Not just for him, but for others as well. The important thing is the reward. But unlike the others, Kim is a former Special Forces agent, a combat specialist. Someone like that wouldn't be easily captured. Kim not only takes out his enemies, but also eliminates several competitors for the 300 million prize. Each time he defeats an opponent, there is one less in the competition, and the devices of the defeated alert what will happen to them upon losing the game, which further increases the despair of some. Kim realizes that, unlike at the beginning, his opponents are more cornered and asks why they are not attacking him. Soon after, he says that if he is not attacked, he will take the initiative. One of the opponents, scared, tells the protagonist not to come closer, and calls on all the others to act together and defeat the man with the briefcase. But this strategy doesn't work, and Kim bursts out laughing. The hunters who decided to gather to capture their common prey ended up falling to the hands of the tiger named Kim Joo-hyuk. The protagonist showed no mercy towards his enemies, leaving those who still stand extremely frightened. As Kim finishes off his enemies, those responsible for collecting the bodies wait for the fall of the others. The remaining participants end up giving up, as they do not want to fight against someone so strong. Instead, they forfeit the prize and start to run. However, among the pack, there are still those who are braver, who claim there is no reason to run, since there is so much money at stake. Kim Joo-hyuk enjoys hearing this, as his desire is to play a little longer instead of finishing quickly. All the enemies attack at the same time with the intention of taking him down. But Kim says that the outcome of this match was decided from the very beginning, as the drones capture everything, and those responsible for the corpses watch the fight. Kim takes out all those who resisted, and in no time, he has his opponents at his feet. With that, the game ends and he is declared the winner. The protagonist then decides to leave the location, claiming that he had a lot of fun. Then, a woman who was watching him says that the protagonist is the type of participant who doesn't usually last long. A mysterious man accompanying her agrees and adds that those who think they are special tend to fall when seeking attention. He also says that the protagonist has no idea how dangerous this game is. However, for Kim, every day is the same. A life stuck in work and no free time to live. Every time he returns home after work, he can barely do anything due to the exhaustion he experienced during his day. However, today was different, because after winning the match, he didn't go home, but instead rented a luxury suite for 20 million wons. He thinks that the money he would take a long time to earn working was made in just 4 days. That's why he decided to celebrate. His account is filled, and Kim thinks this is the life he has always dreamed of. The suite he rented comes with a truly luxurious room service, and he takes the opportunity to order the most expensive dish in the hotel. Kim tries the meat, which, by the way, he doesn't usually eat something so expensive in his daily life. And because of that, he ends up having an unusual reaction. The woman who served him asks if the food is to his liking, and the protagonist confirms, claiming it is quite tasty. However, the woman finds this strange. After all, she is not a legitimate employee, but rather an infiltrator, who was there to observe the protagonist, just like she did earlier at the construction site. She removes her disguise in front of the protagonist, expecting a surprised reaction from him. However, the opposite happens, and the woman asks how he can be so calm in a situation like this. Kim reveals that he knew she was disguised from the beginning, and says he saw her following him from the construction site. Not only that, but Kim knows she is not alone. The mysterious man then appears, saying that the protagonist has good perception and finds that quite interesting. Kim says he doesn't know why he is being followed, but he certainly knows they are dangerous. Furthermore, he claims to have several doubts he would like to clarify. The man asks if the protagonist is trying to extract information from him. Kim says that is exactly the case. Then the man says he would also like to ask the protagonist a few things. They chat for a bit, and the old man asks how the protagonist ended up on these missions. Kim explains that, like them, he received a device and has been carrying out missions ever since. The old man then asks why there is no device on Kim's arm. Upon hearing this, the protagonist realizes they do not know about his glasses and thinks it is better to keep it that way. The woman thinks that if the device is not on the wrists, it might be on the protagonist's ankle, like a prisoner. Kim says it is now his turn to ask and questions whether there is a way to remove the device. The old man responds with another question, saying that if there were a scenario where the protagonist could put a price on freedom, he would ask what that value would be. For his part, the protagonist does not understand the meaning of the question. Then the old man says that for him, the value of freedom is 2 billion wons. He states that this is the amount to make the device disappear. Once, Kim heard from the old man that the people behind the game are called operators. They created everything, from the game, its rules, and even the devices. Rumors say they have connections to illegal products and sell them through the dark web, using that money to finance this macabre project. Moreover, they see the participants as puppets, taking desperate people for money and putting them in situations from which they cannot escape. Once someone enters the game, there is no way out. Kim asks why the old man is speaking about this with such emphasis. The old man says he has encountered people like the protagonist before, and he asks Kim what is more important to him, money or freedom. The protagonist replies that the answer is obvious. He even intends to buy his freedom when he reaches the 10 billion mark. With this, the old man knows that Kim is greedy. Not only that, but he realizes that Kim is confident enough to believe he will win all the missions from now on. In this case, the old man proposes that Kim play a simple game right now. Kim understands that this would be a private match between them and asks if this is some kind of test. He says he is not the type to shy away from a challenge, and his system soon asks if he accepts to play. With this, Kim realizes that the old man has some kind of connection to the system of his glasses. By the way, the old man's name is Gu Woon Mo, and seeing Kim's reaction to the challenge, he asks him if something is wrong. The protagonist sees that the reward for winning this challenge is high. Thus, he feels even more motivated and says there is no problem at all. For his part, Gu Woon Mo claims to be looking forward to the match. The protagonist understands that once the match begins, he cannot leave until he finishes playing and is filled with doubts. But Gu Woon Mo says it is too late for that now, as the roulette has already started spinning. They are rolling dice, and whoever gets a higher number is the winner. This game can last several rounds or can end in the first, depending on the combination. In any case, the woman accompanying Gu acts as the croupier and offers chips to the players. The old man says that the white dice are rolled and revealed simultaneously, while the black dice can be revealed by lifting the cup after the bet. Then Kim Joo-hyuk asks if this is a game of luck. Gu Woon Mo says yes, but based on how calm the protagonist is, he deduces that Kim thinks luck is on his side. Indeed, the protagonist thinks he is lucky. After all, his life has changed drastically for the better in recent days. He remembers that he was never very good in school, and he also never won anything playing the lottery. Luck was never on his side. However, everything changed suddenly. Kim made over 800 million in 3 days, and if that is not luck, he does not know what is. Seeing the young man's excitement, Gu asks if Kim is ready to start. The protagonist believes he can turn a moment of crisis into an opportunity, so he agrees to roll the dice. However, his die lands on the number 1, and he is surprised. Even the old man says that this is a very low number. Still, the protagonist believes it is not over yet, because everything depends on the second die that has yet to be revealed. For his part, the old man bets 100 million on his victory. Kim is surprised, as this amount is quite high for someone who is only in the first round of the game. Moreover, if he loses this game, he will lose everything he has gained so far. However, he decides to keep betting. The croupier reveals the second die. Anticipation builds among the players. Then it is revealed that the value of the second die is 3. Kim gets excited, as he still has a chance to win. But when the next die is revealed, he notices it is another one. Automatically, Kim goes into shock, as he just lost 100 million wons. The old man says this is normal in a dice game, but claims this was just the first round. Kim says he may have lost now, but his luck will change in the next round. Despite believing this, with each round, Kim lost more money, until he reached a total loss of 500 million. With that, the croupier announces that this is the last round of the game, and asks them to roll their dice. Kim takes the lead, and this time has a higher value than his opponent. He feels hopeful and bets 300 million. However, the old man goes all in and says that if Kim wins the game, he will keep everything that is his. The protagonist does not understand why someone who is winning would do such a thing. Therefore, he thinks the old man must be very confident in his victory, and even imagines that the dice might be rigged in his favor. However, he finds it somewhat impossible for that to happen, and decides to continue with the game. Gu Woon Mo gets excited and thinks that Kim is indeed the type of person who does not accept losing. However, he considers himself the same and calls himself the lucky white snake. The old man is a legendary gambler, a predator who usually does not lose. When the dice are revealed, Gu Woon Mo automatically wins. Thus, Kim Joo-hyuk lost a total of 880 million wons. With that, the old man says he had a lot of fun and leaves a card for the protagonist, saying that if he finds something more important than money, he should seek him out, as he hopes to meet Kim again. The next day, a dinner takes place among the employees where Kim works, and the team leader claims to be happy to gather with his team. But while everyone seems to celebrate, Choi Gyu-hong notices strange behavior coming from the protagonist, as Kim's desperation is clear on his face. His superior thinks Kim is acting very strangely and wonders why, but he thinks it's better to stay quiet, as he does not want this to burden him. Then, someone approaches the protagonist, saying that he is dining with his colleagues, but does not seem to feel well. This man is the company president, Baek Deok Man. Concerned about Kim, he asks what is wrong. For his part, the protagonist completely ignores the president, which makes Choi panic. After all, this is a great disrespect. Then, Choi himself speaks up and tries to ease the situation. However, Baek Deok Man says it's all right and understands that sometimes it's hard to talk about one's problems in front of others. Then, he asks Kim to accompany him outside for a moment. When the two step out, the rest of the table comments on Kim's strange behavior, and say that since he arrived to work in the morning, he has been completely off. One of the employees says that behaving like this in front of Baek Deok Man is not good. After all, he tends to lose his temper when drunk. Soo-yeon, however, says that the president is not drunk yet, so everything should end well. But her colleagues say that Baek Deok Man is actually a good person when sober, but when he drinks, he becomes someone different, nicknamed Smiling Buddha. Meanwhile outside, Baekdeok Man confronts Kim and says that he does not know his place, then tells him to go back and enjoy the party like everyone else. He also says he does not understand what is wrong with this current generation, as he believes that young people today no longer know how to have fun. While listening to his boss ramble on, the protagonist can only think about the amount he lost and does not pay attention to anything else around him. Besides, he wonders if he will have to work like a slave for drunks like Baekdeok Man for the rest of his life. Irritated, the president slaps Kim and asks if he is listening. He also says he will give 100,000 wons for every slap he lands on Kim, claiming that he should be grateful for this mental education. In the protagonist's mind, he wishes to retaliate by breaking the arm of the drunk in front of him, but his system has given him a new mission, asking him to behave like someone who has truly changed their mindset. In that, after taking a few hits, the protagonist claims that this served to open his eyes and thanks his boss for his wise words. Not only that, but he claims it is an honor to work alongside Baekdeok Man and asks if he can teach him more often. Baekdeok Man enjoys hearing this and says that this is the spirit he wants to see in his employees. He then says that they should go back and drink a little more. For his part, the protagonist did not want to be acting, but his system assigned the mission to kidnap the president, which Kim is even excited to do. After all, he only thinks about the reward he will receive at the end of the task. Sometime later, Baekdeok Man wakes up feeling somewhat disoriented, until he realizes he is tied up and asks Kim what is happening. With a smile on his face, Kim says that the president has been kidnapped. Confused, Baekdeok Man asks if this is some kind of prank. Kim tells his boss that he was wandering drunk in the streets until 4 in the morning, claiming he didn't want to go home. The protagonist claims that he did exactly what his boss wanted and could not leave him alone. Baekdeok Man then asks to use his phone. With that, the protagonist says that he took a peek at his boss's phone while he was sleeping and found some very interesting things. Deeply irritated, Baekdeok Man starts cursing the protagonist, stating that he is trash who doesn't know who he is dealing with. Kim, however, says that it is actually Baekdeok Man who still doesn't understand who he is dealing with. He shows what he found on Baekdeok Man's phone and asks who he is to call someone trash. Baekdeok Man changes his approach to a softer one and asks how Kim discovered these things. The protagonist simply says that Baek wouldn't understand, but claims that strange things tend to happen in the world. Kim managed to hack his boss's phone with the help of his system and tells Baek that he is starting to understand the situation he is in. However, he claims that if he tries to contact the police, something interesting will happen. While fiddling with his boss's phone, Kim finds something else, a folder with compromising content about some female employees of the company. Baekdeok Man knows exactly what is in there. Then the protagonist asks what the president thinks of his female employees. In response, Baek says he sees the employees as obedient dogs to their master. He asserts that they didn't know their place and were acting arrogantly, precisely because they couldn't get far in life without dragging someone down. Baek believes he simply gave them a chance and states that everyone has a skeleton hidden in the closet. Irritated, Kim says that Baek is indeed trash without salvation. His boss says that they are not different. After all, the way he is being treated by Kim confirms that. For his part, Kim shuts down his abusive boss and says he will give him 100,000 wons for every time he slaps him. Just as his boss said before, Kim says that Baek should be grateful for being mentally trained. Furious, Baek threatens Kim, claiming that he cannot touch a single hair on his head. But before he could say more, Kim lands a solid slap on him. With nothing to do, Baek falls to the ground and stays there. Soon, Kim approaches and asks if he thinks he is a superior being just because he has money. Desperate, Baek tries to negotiate with Kim. However, the protagonist claims that working hard and living a happy life is something difficult to achieve, but trash like Baek goes down another path, and that is why they think they have the right to belittle and look down on others. Kim says that his only wish is for Baek to know what injustice is at least once in his life. However, to Baek's surprise, a guy arrives at the scene. He says he found the target that needs to be saved, and his partner asks what is wrong with the tied-up man. For his part, Baek begs to be saved, claiming he was kidnapped by a man. The man who just arrived received the mission to rescue Baek from his system and claims he is there to help, but asks for patience to do his job. Kim then understands what is happening, but he appears to be very calm, which frightens his adversaries. However, before they could do anything about it, the protagonist already arrives with both feet in the door. He catches both opponents by surprise. In a matter of seconds, Kim defeats them, which crushes all of Baek's hopes of being rescued. The way the protagonist defeats his opponents makes Baek realize that escaping this situation will not be easy. But soon after, someone cuts the rope that was binding him. The protagonist himself deliberately freed Baek. He says that now that he has saved him from danger, he would like to negotiate a salary increase. Then Kim claims that his salary will be increased 5-fold. Moreover, he also wants a promotion to a position with the least working hours in the company. However, Kim asserts that the most important thing is that, from now on, Baek will be his pet and will do everything he is ordered to do, in addition to being treated as someone inferior to a human, just as he once viewed others. Far from there, in the city prison, a guard visits the cell of prisoner 3270. He also received the bracelet with the system. His mission is to let a first-degree criminal escape. Not only that, but he chose one of the worst inmates in the jail to release. The system itself warns that, with the escape, a new game will begin. On a beautiful workday, Choi arrives at the company and notices strange activity. His colleagues say that Choi needs to see this. He approaches and is shocked by what he sees. For, on the other side, the protagonist is on a throne, greeting everyone. Kim Joo-hyuk says that, due to an order from the company president, he has had a change of position and taken on other tasks in the corporation. However, Choi wonders how Kim managed such an achievement. The protagonist is now the president's right-hand man and says he is eager to work in his new role. On the other hand, Kim remembers that, because of the glasses, all his money is gone. He even made quite a bit of money, but lost everything he had, even the money he earned before these games. However, he thinks that if he had a ticket, he could win 500,000 in a single day. But the reason Kim is not happy about this is the fact that the countdown of his system is decreasing rapidly, and he is nowhere near reaching the goal of 1 billion. Moreover, if he fails, his fate will be sealed. The protagonist does not want to let that happen, but he does not have a ticket to use. Thus, any mission or game that appears, he cannot refuse. Back in the previous prison, the control center is monitoring the escort of some prisoners. A bus is transporting them, and a specific target is inside. At least, that is what they believe, for the one responsible for the security of the transport is the same officer who freed the dangerous prisoner. After taking control of the situation, he opens the prisoner's compartment and throws the keys to one of them, telling the guy to do whatever he wants, although he cannot escape, no matter what he does. When the game starts, the hackers will likely take control of the security cameras and police radios. Then the man tells the prisoners to flee as far as they can, even though, in any case, they will never be able to escape. After all, this man's mission is to hunt down fleeing criminals. Desperate, the prisoners begin to free themselves in search of freedom. People like these tend to be desperate enough to face great dangers in order to achieve their goals. Inside the bus, the most dangerous prisoner also frees himself. The others see him as an ally in the escape. He heard the prisoners talking about money hidden under the floor and wants to go there first. For him, it does not matter if he has to turn Korea upside down, as long as he finds his precious money. As the bus speeds along, a drone monitors it. Those hunting the prisoners are watching everything. One of them says they need to hurry before other hunters show up to join the chase, as he does not want to share his prey. 4 hours after the game starts, the hunter is chasing his targets and captures them with a harpoon. Claiming that criminals do not deserve special treatment, he says that, for a convicted criminal, their prey usually cries like little children. For the hunter, it is even good to have a large number of targets, as the reward is greater, and for him, it is more advantageous to capture one at a time than to try to attack them all together. However, someone different from his partner appears and says that brilliant minds think alike, as he claims he also captures his targets one at a time. This is one of the thugs from the bus who captured the hunter's partner, and is now after the other. The hunter is caught off guard and tries to calm the criminal. However, he is not successful in this task. Sometime later, the criminal tells his leader that he took care of the threats, but one of his colleagues ended up being taken down. He asks how many people are out there hunting them. In turn, the leader of the criminal says he has no idea and doesn't care about it either. He claims he didn't bother to count how many hunters he eliminated. He also mentions that it's been a while since he had this much fun. But now he wants to find the money that is buried before he gets interrupted again. And he says that those who don't want to share the same fate as the hunters should hurry. His ally says that these hunters are members of some gang, but he couldn't find out which organization they belong to. However, he discovered that they have these watches in common. He also found out that bounties have been placed on the heads of the fugitive prisoners. The leader then becomes curious to know what the bounty is for him. His ally then reveals that the amount is 500 million wons. With that, the big guy celebrates, claiming that this has always been his dream. His ally thinks that this guy must be crazy, especially since 5 of the fugitive prisoners have already perished. One of the diggers says they have already found a bit of buried money, 3 buckets containing 500 million each, and there are still 3 more to go. With that, the thug thinks the total is 3 billion, a much larger amount than he expected, and it could be even bigger if he didn't have to share this sum with the others. He thinks that with this money he could start over, but for that, he will have to leave the others behind. Meanwhile, a hunter watches everything from afar and discovers that the prisoners are digging up money, but he also realizes that they are more dangerous than he imagined. His partner asks if they are really going to continue. The hunter says yes, after all, the reward for this task is great and cannot be ignored. There are 3 of them, and one of the hunters feels bad about having to hunt humans for money. However, his colleague says that criminals like these are not human, and the only thing he should worry about is the amount each one is worth. After that, he says they need to come up with a plan to catch them all. The leader of the group of hunters says that the ideal would be to keep their distance and hit them from afar, so they can stay safe. Besides, this would help them take the targets one at a time. However, when he least expected it, the hunter is surprised. He gets a huge scare thinking it's a criminal. However, the person approaching says they can lower their guard now. Kim Joo-hyuk joins the hunt and claims to be just an office worker, and asks if they are also participating in the game, because he has a good plan and would like to know if they are interested in hearing it. Still somewhat startled, the hunters remain defensive. They say they don't know the protagonist. Therefore, they warn him to keep his distance. One of the hunters says the protagonist could very well be an enemy, so he will count to 3 for him to back off, otherwise he will shoot. Even so, Kim insists that he has a good method to share, but as soon as the count reaches 3, the hunter fires. For his part, the protagonist manages to deflect the arrow that was shot at him, which leaves the hunters quite surprised. Kim says the hunter's mistake was announcing when he was going to shoot, and claims that this shows amateurism on their part. He also says that for now, he is being nice and asks if they have any other problems to resolve. The accused hunters claim they do not. In that case, Kim says they can start the operation. On the other side, the fugitives are still digging. Some of them don't like doing this because they are working hard because their leader forgot the exact spot where he buried the money. But soon after, they are surprised by an unexpected visit. Not only that, but the criminals ask why these 3 men appeared empty-handed. Trembling with fear, the leader of the hunters simply tells his colleagues to run. Then they start to run as they attract the attention of the enemies. The hunters actually served as bait to lure some criminals away from the others. Obviously, all of this was the protagonist's plan, who arranged a meeting place with them. But upon arriving there, the hunters do not find Kim. They become scared, as that was the plan until then. However, before they could run, the thugs surround them. With shovels in hand, the fugitives say they are prepared with the perfect tools to deal with this situation. Without further ado, they charge into the attack. But an axe is thrown in the direction of one of the enemies. Irritated, he asks who threw that. At that moment, the protagonist appears and says that his target doesn't need to know who he is. Kim throws a lit torch into the field surrounding the house, and says that now, no one will be able to escape his sight. Therefore, Kim believes that getting rid of them will guarantee him easy money. The hunters understand that they are also targets of Kim, and ask what happened to their plan. Kim doesn't want to hear about it, and his unusual attitude even scares dangerous criminals. Thanks to this, they become easy prey. The protagonist hits his first target, and sarcastically says that the others can start to panic. The fugitives decide to band together and attack all at once. For the protagonist, this is even an advantage, because he uses the confusion of his enemies against them. Kim takes them down mercilessly, and even takes the enemy's weapons to use against them. Seeing his allies fall before his eyes, one of them becomes terrified. However, Kim has no intention of sparing anyone. After disarming the last target, he goes in for hand-to-hand combat. With just one blow, the protagonist takes his opponent to the ground. Seeing this leaves the other hunters in shock. They believe that in a game like this, a player has to choose between money and their own life. But they realize that Kim is different, calling him the ultimate hunter. A little later, the fugitive responsible for the money search appears, and asks what happened to the others. He sees the protagonist and asks if he was the one who took down his allies. Kim asks if the target in front of him is seeking revenge. The fugitive says no and claims to be there only to finish the job that Kim couldn't complete. He also says that the protagonist is an amateur, who is afraid to get his hands dirty with blood. After that, he asks if the protagonist is ready to have his body pierced. Kim replies that, in fact, he has already been injured several times, which his opponent finds hilarious. Then, the enemy says he will inflict permanent injuries on Kim. But the protagonist doesn't want to make it easy for him and dodges the attacks. He tries to be faster than the enemy. Otherwise, he knows he will be hit. What the protagonist didn't expect is that his enemy is ambidextrous and can attack from both sides. So, he asks for a moment before continuing. His opponent agrees and asks if the protagonist wants to borrow one of his knives. Kim says no, as he is looking for something different. He goes to the gardening tools, and is grateful that this property has exactly what he needs. His opponent asks if the protagonist is really going to fight with that. With 2 garden sickles in hand, Kim says yes, as he feels like a praying mantis with them. Then, he asks if his opponent is ready to start again. In his thoughts, the criminal says that, in his approaches, whenever he shows his knife, his targets change their attitude and become afraid. Regardless of size or confidence, a blade is enough to scare them, especially when he goes into action. The thug even enjoys this and feels satisfaction in seeing a situation like this. However, this time, his target is not afraid at all. The protagonist's face shows joy in being in such a fight, which confuses his enemy. In any case, Kim begins to attack now that he is armed. His opponent tries to defend himself as best he can, but realizes that now, instead of hunting, he is being hunted, which makes him very angry. So, he decides to threaten the protagonist. However, instead of feeling fear, Kim finds the situation amusing, making his enemy even more furious and confused by such behavior, until he starts to realize that there is only one reason to be treated this way, and concludes that, probably, his opponent sees him as just a simple insect. The enemy's rage only increases with this conclusion, as he wants to prove to the protagonist that he is not insignificant. However, even becoming more aggressive, Kim does not see his opponent as a real threat, and scoffs at him whenever he can. Not only that, but he goes on the attack, this time, with the intention of ending this fight. After defeating his enemy, Kim says that he didn't know his proper place until he faced an equal opponent. Now, Kim says that there is only one enemy left to defeat. He heads toward his target along with the other hunters, until the leader of the hunters asks if they can leave now. Kim asks why they want to go. The hunter says that the remaining criminal is brutal, and they believe they cannot handle someone like that. Besides, they didn't even intend to go after this guy initially, as they were going to be content with just the smaller targets. Soon after, they are surprised, as the main target appears and understands that he is the subject of the hunters. Then, he says that introductions will not be necessary. Immediately, the protagonist turns and lands a punch on the enemy. However, this did not have the expected effect, forcing Kim to attack again. His enemy remains standing and finds the situation quite interesting. The protagonist says he is facing someone very resilient. In a way, both begin to enjoy this and see a worthy opponent in each other. It doesn't take long for them to start facing off. Kim doesn't waste any time and attacks with everything he has. But he is not facing just any adversary. He even manages to land a few hits. However, his enemy takes them and still remains standing. Not only that, but he also retaliates. This makes the protagonist wonder how someone can withstand so many consecutive attacks and still keep fighting. Kim has never faced anyone this strong before and is not used to it. Even so, he does not give up. However, his adversary begins to enjoy the fight and makes it harder for the protagonist to act. He realizes that winning this fight will be more difficult than he imagined, as the brute in front of him does not seem to be tired. The enemy advances towards the protagonist and manages to hold him, breaking his stance. Kim feels the pain of the blow and also becomes vulnerable. After all, his enemy has captured him. The big guy tries to completely immobilize the protagonist and tells Kim that the difference in strength between them is noticeable. However, Kim says it is common knowledge that there are people who overcome this type of strength with knowledge. For the superhuman strength that humans exert in extreme situations can surpass the brute force of some opponents. After Kim overcomes his adversary's strength, he says he is special and, therefore, will win. He claims that he usually holds back from using all his strength in combat, but on occasions like this, he makes an exception. With that, he throws his enemy to the ground, telling him not to get up. Through the big guy's fall, Kim completes the mission and earns the bonus for the victory. He says that, in the end, his muscles won again, the game is over, and the protagonist made a good amount of money. This makes him remember his old times. On the other hand, the other hunters who watch the fight are even more horrified by Kim's performance. Until the leader of the hunters has an idea to avoid a loss. He suggests to his group to go to the money unearthed from the fugitives and divide it among themselves. Then they tell Kim that they will withdraw to deal with the rest of the situation and say goodbye. However, the protagonist asks what they are talking about. But before he can hear an explanation, Kim is hit by a tranquilizer dart. Not just him, but the other hunters as well. The others fall to the ground, but Kim manages to resist. The one who fired the shots approaches and says he is surprised that the protagonist is still standing. Kim cannot identify him, so he asks who that man is. The mysterious man is not alone. He says that Kim is quite curious, and mentions that he will find his answers soon. Kim then falls to the ground, as the dart finally takes effect. The masked man says that from now on, things will only get better, and he is looking forward to it. For his part, the protagonist hardly knows what awaits him. In a place completely on fire, a boy tries to escape the flames, until, in the midst of the escape, someone approaches him asking why he is fleeing alone. The boy then becomes scared and sad, until, shortly after, the protagonist wakes up, for he was just having a nightmare. He gets up and realizes he is in his bed at home, but he doesn't quite remember what happened. The last thing he recalls is defeating the escaped prisoner, and being hit by a dart, fired by a mysterious masked man. Kim thinks that this masked man can only be with the game organization. Then, he hears the sound of the TV. On the news, it is announced that an accident destroyed a bus transporting prisoners and everyone perished in the fire. The protagonist knows well that this is not what happened, but realizes that this is an attempt to cover up traces. In any case, he decides to check his bank balance, and notes the amount of 1,700,000,000, which means nothing has changed. Then, he checks the status of his mission and notes that the goal of reaching 1 billion in 7 days has been achieved, which means everything is going according to plan. But when he runs his hand over his neck, he notices something different. His system alerts him that a device with a bomb has been implanted in him, and that Kim will have to complete 5 chain missions within the stipulated time. Otherwise, the device will be activated and the bomb will explode. Meanwhile, Choi is in the building of the company where he works. He was assigned to get coffee every day for Kim, and is not enjoying it at all. But in the midst of his thoughts, he notices someone approaching. Kim arrives running and shouts for Choi to get out of the way. Like a jet, Kim passes by Choi, causing him to spill the coffee on the floor. Impressed, Choi thinks that Kim must have something urgent to resolve. Already in the building, Yoo Soo-yeon is working normally, until the protagonist arrives at her desk completely agitated, which leaves the girl quite startled. She asks what is happening. Kim received a mission from his system to contact Yoo Soo-yeon, so he went after her. Even so, Soo-yeon asks what is so important that he arrived so quickly. The protagonist needs to keep her within approximately 3 meters, so he uses his new position to ask Soo-yeon for help with work. However, he knows he has to be convincing enough, otherwise, he won't be able to persuade her. He then says that instead of working, he would like Soo-yeon to talk to him about her concerns, and he will let Choi handle all the work in her place. Choi appears, and Kim says the timing couldn't be more perfect. Then he says he will help with everything that is requested. Even against his will, Choi agrees. Kim also mentions that regarding all the expenses during his colleague's break, they will be paid with the company president's corporate card. But for that, Soo-yeon will have to agree to go with him. Thus, she doesn't even consider refusing. Then they both leave and go to a park. Soon after, they go bowling, and even catch a movie. Meanwhile, Kim knows he has to keep Soo-yeon close until the deadline, but he just realized that this might look like a date. In any case, he decides to take her to dinner at an expensive restaurant. Soo-yeon says she had a lot of fun during the day and hasn't had such fun since her school days. She thinks she is working hard to live her life, but sometimes feels quite lost. But thanks to her colleague, she feels good now, even though she knows he did this only because of work. Although she is a bit tipsy, she makes a point of thanking Kim for what he did for her. For his part, the protagonist's system asks him to make Soo-yeon laugh, and he decides to imitate a sea lion, using utensils as fake teeth. At first, Soo-yeon finds this quite strange, but she can't help it and starts to laugh. With that, Kim completed another task, and he is starting to think that this mission will be easy to complete, despite the risk. Next, the waiter approaches with a special order, saying that, on behalf of the restaurant, he has a gift. As soon as he reveals the gift, Kim realizes it is a device, and he is shocked, as he didn't expect this. His system asks him to install the watch on his colleague, as this is part of the mission. Soo-yeon has no idea what is happening, as for her this is just a simple gift from the restaurant. For his part, Kim asks the waiter who he is. With a serious look, the waiter simply tells the protagonist to behave, or there will be consequences. Kim then understands that this is not a common situation, and will have to keep playing. His colleague asks if something is wrong. Meanwhile, the protagonist thinks that this game is a dilemma, where human lives are treated like toys. In any case, he tells Soo-yeon that there is nothing wrong, and he picks up the watch to take a look. Sometime later, Kim takes her home. Soo-yeon ended up falling asleep after a busy day. He then thinks he can take advantage of this to put the watch on her, and quickly finish his mission. After all, the only thing that truly matters in this world is money. Besides, he considers his own life more important than that of others. However, he wonders why he is hesitating, until a voice speaks to the protagonist, and says it will not tell anyone what he is about to do. The voice says that to survive, it is necessary to do things like this. The masked man from before says he knows everything about Kim, claiming that he is special, but despite that, he is just like the other participants, a greedy capitalist. He also says that controlling humans is easy, and the reason for this is that people are easier to buy than some animals. For his part, the protagonist asks if the voice on the other side really thinks it has control over him. He says he needs to tell a secret to the masked man. First, he claims to be quite furious about the situation he has been placed in, and he reveals that when he gets angry, he tends to turn the world around him upside down. The voice asks what Kim is trying to do. In turn, the protagonist tries to rip out the device implanted in his neck. Not only that, but with a simple knife, he manages to remove the device, claiming that he will not be manipulated for money. He also says that, in fact, it is he who is using the system to his advantage, not the other way around. The voice on the other end does not back down, and asks how far the protagonist thinks he will get. Soon after, drones approach where Kim is. Not only that, but they are armed, and they begin to set fire around his house. The voice says that 5 people living nearby are now in danger. Therefore, Kim must save the 5 people from the fire or protect his coworker, as the mysterious man has placed a bounty on Soo-yeon's head and spread it to all the players in the region, claiming that the fact that Kim wants to protect her will be put to the test, and he will have to keep Soo-yeon safe from the other participants. Then, he claims it will be fun to see the protagonist act during this mission. The masked man puts the protagonist in a moral dilemma and says he must hurry his decision. In turn, Kim thinks it is better to try to call emergency services, but he sees that his phone has been hacked, and the masked man claims that he will not be able to call anyone, because he has everything under control in his hands and no authority will show up to help Kim. In this case, the protagonist claims he only has one solution. He starts shouting intensely the word, "Fire!" in hopes that everyone around will hear in time to run. His neighbors hear the screams and indeed see the fire nearby. Even Soo-yeon, who was sleeping, wakes up. Kim, however, covers her with a blanket, and pulls Soo-yeon wrapped up out of the building. After they are outside, he says that everything will be okay. Meanwhile, the neighbors try to call emergency services, but no one can use their phones. Kim tells his coworker to stay there and keep covered until he returns. She asks where the protagonist is going in such a dangerous situation. Kim replies that as a child, he had to flee from a fire to survive, but being so scared at the time, he could not save anyone but himself. Therefore, from that day on, he decided he would never leave innocent people in danger again. With that, he runs towards the fire to rescue the others. Soo-yeon, still scared, thinks it is madness to go back into a burning building. Some curious people start to approach, and some even say they are lucky not to live in that building. Not only that, but instead of helping, they start filming the fire to post on their social media. With nothing else to do, they decided to try to capitalize on the panic of others. After all, they know very well that the despair of some is converted into entertainment for others. However, amidst these people, a hero emerges. The protagonist did the impossible, carrying people out of the building when no one else decided to help. After bringing out 4 people at once, he says that they both inhaled a lot of smoke and need medical attention. Soo-yeon asks where he is going. The protagonist replies that there is still one resident left inside and he needs to save them. However, the masked man warns that a player is approaching Soo-yeon, and if Kim leaves her now, he may not find her alive again. At this crossroads, Kim remembers his past. Then, he decides to run as fast as he can to save the person in danger. He has less than a minute to do this and claims he will accomplish the task, contradicting the masked man. Shortly after, Kim finds the last survivor lying on the floor of their apartment. But the masked man says that he has been breaking the rules of the game and therefore, will have to face penalties. Thus, if he saves this person, he will deduct $1 billion from Kim's account. Or he can simply leave without saving this person and keep his current money. Outside, Soo-yeon is worried about her colleague, until someone approaches and addresses her, asking if she is the person who lives at Haru Village, number 204. Soo-yeon asks if this man knows her. He replies that yes and that he has been looking for her. After that, he reveals he has a knife and tells Soo-yeon to follow him without drawing attention. The girl becomes a little scared, but before the attacker could drag her away, someone approaches and scares him. The protagonist orders the aggressor to put the knife on the ground, stating that if he touches the girl, he will regret it. In turn, the aggressor claims that the reward of 300 million is his and he won't let another participant take it. as he arrived first. He then tries to stab the girl with a knife, but the protagonist throws a shoe in his direction, stopping him. Soo-yeon is so scared that she falls to the ground. Meanwhile, the aggressor says it's too late to help her. However, Kim runs towards her and ends up taking a stab in place of the girl. As he approaches the thug, he tells him he warned him not to do that. Even so, the enemy refuses to back down. Then, the protagonist headbutts him, causing the aggressor to pass out and fall to the ground. For his part, the protagonist starts to feel unwell, as he inhaled too much smoke, and also falls to the ground unconscious. Soo-yeon is worried about her colleague, and tries to get him to regain consciousness. However, a man named Jin Young-cheol approaches, and asks if he should take the target, or handle the situation right there. Startled, Soo-yeon has no idea what is happening. But for now, she won't get help. After all, the protagonist is unconscious on the ground. Upon hearing a commotion, Kim wonders if this is another nightmare, until he realizes it's the voice of a young person and notes that he is not dreaming. On the other side of the room he is in, a boy tells a man not to come near him. The same man from before tells the boy to stop screaming and stay still. Kim then quickly approaches and tries to strike the unknown man, but the man manages to block the protagonist's punch. Even so, Kim tells the stranger to stay away from the boy. Until, next, Gu Woon-emo appears armed and tells them to stop this commotion immediately. Kim recognizes Gu Woon-emo from before, but armed, the old man says that acting recklessly is the same as digging your own grave. Kim realizes that the boy is terrified and, by the way, also has a device on his wrist. He didn't know that even children were being recruited for the game, which makes him furious. For his part, Gu Woon-emo tells Kim not to get involved, but the protagonist insists that they leave the boy alone. Then, Gu asks why. After waking up in an unknown place, he wants to save a boy he has never seen before. Kim says the reason is quite simple. The boy is asking for help. And there is also the fact that they both seem to be criminals. With that, Gu Woon-emo says that, as a criminal, he will perform a non-peaceful act. The protagonist tries to protect the boy, standing in front of him. But when Gu shot, only water came out of his gun. The boy starts laughing at the situation, saying that Kim fell for the prank. After that, Kim lifts the boy up high and realizes that he is on the side of the thugs. In this case, he intends to teach him a good lesson about life. So, he starts shaking the boy until he begs him to stop. Soon after, Gu Woon-emo says he will explain everything calmly. His colleague says that Kim is better than they imagine. For his part, the protagonist asks who they are. The old man says that this was just a test, and that this child is not in real danger. Moreover, he says he is part of the liberation group. After serving coffee to Kim, he says there is a lot to talk about, so he will have to summarize. Gu Woon-emo says that last night, they found him unconscious along with a girl. She was taken to the hospital, but due to the shock, she doesn't remember exactly what happened. He also says that it was his colleague Jin Young-cheol who saved them. Now, Gu asks if the protagonist has any more questions. Kim thinks the old man is telling the truth and thanks him for the help, but says that Gu Woon-emo wouldn't do something like this without having a reason in mind. Gu says that Kim gained notoriety by becoming a ranked player, and his assets have exceeded 2 billion wons. However, he asks how long Kim thinks this will last. Gu says that when Kim earns more money and his ranking rises, he could become a target for other forces or other rankers. Unlike this time, in the future there may be things he cannot resolve alone. The protagonist thinks this is true, and that Soo-yeon was in danger because of him, and this could happen again. Gu then says he has a proposal. He tells Kim to join his group, and if he accepts, he will return the 800 million he won from him last time. The old man claims that he and Kim have the same goal and need to ally. Kim is caught off guard by this proposal and thinks there must be a catch. Gu insists that is not the case. He claims that everyone who joins his group earns 400 million wons and says that, if Kim joins, he will give him the other half later. He believes that Kim will not stop playing, regardless of the situation, but he gives him some time to think about his answer. Sometime later, Kim thinks it doesn't seem real that he has 1,700,000,000 in his account, not to mention what he still has to receive. His system claims that there is a box heading towards Kim, and he has an unread message. In the message, the masked figure says he likes Kim and will not take the recent events personally. Thus, he hopes Kim enjoys his gift. Kim is outraged by this attitude from the unknown person, especially after everything that has happened. He thinks it is completely normal for his money to disappear at any moment, and that it is also impossible to withdraw large sums of money due to the system's control. Therefore, he wants to experience some of this money before it disappears again. With that, he decides to eat an expensive sushi. As he savors the food, Kim is amazed by the taste. He is not used to eating something so good, so every time, he tries to make the most of it. He thinks he saw something like this on TV some time ago. A guy who won the lottery revealed in an interview that the thing he liked most about his new life was savoring foods that were previously inaccessible. Moreover, with the newly acquired amount, he claimed that his life became much easier. Thinking about this, Kim believes he should do the same, and make the most of the rich life. 4 days later, a new gaming location was designated, and participants were called to join the match. Among them is Kim Joo-hyuk, but unlike the others, he is the only one who is radiant with joy. His happy face starts to annoy the others. In his thoughts, Kim says that after the match, he should look for an apartment with a nice view, until someone says he is late. The boy from before calls the protagonist Master, and tells Kim to take care of him. Kim recognizes the boy. He just didn't know he was an active member of the Liberation Group. He questions the boy's age, and the boy replies that he is 15 years old. The protagonist thinks that instead of playing a game like this, the boy should be in school. But instead, he will have to form a team with him to defeat the other participants. The protagonist's system alerts about the formation of teams. He then realizes that the old man played dirty, because he thought that, in fact, Young Chio would be responsible for this task. In any case, the boy says that the team is counting on them, so he wants to know if the protagonist is really strong enough to complete the mission. Kim does not like being questioned by a kid, but the boy persists, and says that he makes a grim face when he is dissatisfied. Irritated, Kim tells the boy that he does not like him. However, the boy starts to tremble, and says that this time he really needs to win. In any case, Kim tells the boy to stay in the back and follow him until the end of the mission. He assures the boy that he is strong enough to protect a child. The participants wait for the start of the challenge outside, until, over the loudspeaker, it is announced that their mission is to protect the king. For this, they need to form 4 teams, where one member of the team will be the king and the others will protect him. The boy realizes that he has been chosen to be the king, and his team didn't even get to decide that on their own. Kim realizes that this actually makes his job easier, as protecting the boy was indeed his initial decision. However, he knows that in a game like this, one mistake can cost someone's life. Being the only group with a boy, the protagonist's team automatically becomes the main target of the others. The boy also realizes this, and knows that he has now become the main target of everyone else's gaze. The countdown ends and the game begins. Soon after, the others rush towards the boy. Frightened, he can barely move and just closes his eyes, trying to protect himself. But when he opens his eyes, he realizes that Kim has lifted him and taken him out of the danger zone. Sarcastically, the opponents praise the protagonist's speed. However, they say that if he keeps just protecting the boy, he won't be able to attack, and it will only be a matter of time before he loses. They even ask how long the protagonist can keep playing the role of a horse. In a game of hunter and prey like this, there is no option but to win or lose. Frightened, the boy pulls the protagonist's hair and doesn't know what to do anymore. Contrary to expectations, Kim gets excited about this game. He even imagines himself as an Azura. However, in the eyes of his opponents, he and the boy are acting like fools. The guys want to resolve this quickly, until one of them notices that a pair isn't moving and asks why. They realize that these two seem to be twins, and the fact that they aren't attacking the weaker group makes them suspicious. Then, the bullies start confronting the twins, saying they might even change their minds about who should be the first king to fall. Fortunately for the protagonist, someone appears to divert their attention. With that, he thinks he needs to make the most of this chance. However, the boy constantly distracts the protagonist. Noticing this, an opponent imagines he can catch the protagonist off guard and take down the king. Meanwhile, Kim tells the boy to strengthen his legs so he can stand. The boy doesn't understand what he is saying, but soon after, he notices the approach of the enemies. Kim then throws the boy into the air like a cheerleader. Then, he does the splits and hits both enemies at once. Not only that, but he manages to catch the boy before he hits the ground. However, having been surprised by this crazy strategy, the boy is shocked by what just happened. Kim puts him on the ground and tells him to wait until he finishes dealing with the others. But in the boy's mind, he wonders who this person in front of him really is. In the midst of this, they both hear screams, and they realize that on the other side, one of the twins has made his first hunt. While his prey screams in pain and begs to be freed, the hunter says there's no reason to do that, as he is having a lot of fun. In any case, he ends up releasing the opponent's face, but only after causing quite a bit of damage. His brother doesn't fall behind. He also caught a prey and says that now his hunt no longer has a huge nose. Irritated, the opponent swears revenge, but his words don't stop him from receiving a precise knee strike. With that, he falls to the ground, fast asleep. Even for Kim, seeing this was a bit surprising. Now only 2 teams are left, his and the cruel twins. However, the announcer announces the end of the first game, and says that the next one will start soon in the gym. At the location of the next trial, the protagonist asks if the boy is okay to continue. Even scared, the boy says yes. Upon hearing this, Kim wonders why a cowardly boy would go so far. Then, the game host introduces himself and says he is finally in front of his puppets. Kim, however, realizes he is facing another costumed clown. The host congratulates them for passing the first stage and claims they finished earlier than expected. Even so, he will prepare the next game. Then, he explains that the next game is a 2 against 2 with random cards. He also says that the rules are simple. Each turn, a team will receive cards with body parts. In the attack turn, they can attack the body part drawn on the card. Otherwise, they will receive an attack on the body part drawn on the card. The rule of protecting the king remains until only one team is left. Moreover, the king can give any order to his team member, even to take a hit in his place. The king's words are absolute, and anyone who disobeys will be considered to have broken the rules and will go bankrupt immediately. With the necessary explanations given, the host starts the game. For his part, Kim realizes that this is not good. He thinks this game becomes even more dangerous against these 2 opponents. Kim suggests stopping the game before it starts. However, the boy says that's not possible. Then, the protagonist asks why he insists so much on continuing to play. The boy simply says that he is the king and his word is absolute. It doesn't take long for the protagonist to realize that this was a terrible idea. The protagonist sees no sense in continuing with this game, and tries to spare the boy from it, claiming, in fact, that he can use his title as king to avoid a worse evil. However, the boy only thinks about victory, as he doesn't believe there is any alternative other than winning. Kim says he doesn't know the burden the boy is carrying. However, He asks why he acts as if the world is about to collapse. The boy then reveals that he is doing this for his sister. The one who should have been his father went to buy cigarettes and left his children behind with a huge debt. Soon, the boy's sister took on a responsibility that wasn't hers. She told her brother Suho that if he could work harder, he could pay off the debt soon and their problems would end. Since always, little Suho heard these words, and just the fact that his older sister was always smiling made the end of their debt and problems never come. Moreover, Suho's sister is missing, and he believes that if he can pay off the debt, he could have her back. That's why he can't stop playing now. After hearing this, Kim claims that children shouldn't take care of adults. Then, he says that as an adult, he doesn't need to take orders from a boy. Anyway, Kim agrees to continue with the game. With both teams on the field, the host starts the match. The opposing team begins to attack, and the card says for the twin to strike his opponent in the torso. The happy face of the twin shows how much he is enjoying this. Kim knew it wouldn't be easy. Not only that, but he feels the force of the blow, for even his internal organs felt the shock when he was hit. In the first round, the protagonist is aware of what is to come. Then, the host says it's Team 2's turn to attack. The card that the protagonist draws isn't very good. He then thinks that his bad luck decided to show up just at a moment like this. Unlike him, his opponent draws the best cards. Soon, the opposing team gains the advantage, and the protagonist gets beaten more with each round. However, the opponent starts to notice something strange. He realizes that despite this, the protagonist shows no fear. On the contrary, Kim, in a way, gets excited about the situation. His brother approaches and asks if the twin is really attacking with everything. The host says that Team 1 has swapped players, and now he will reveal the next card. For his part, the twin who will attack says that the protagonist might be pretending to be fine, but claims that it won't last long. In Kim's mind, he thinks he has taken enough hits and probably won't last much longer if it continues like this. Until then, the boy asks for a substitution, which surprises Kim. He tries to convince the boy not to do it, but Suho is the king and asserts that this is an order. Suho claims to know what he is doing and says he will stay on defense from now on, then tells Kim to take care of the attack. The opponent says that the boy has probably never been hit for real before. Then, he claims that he will teach him how painful a real hit can be. With that, he lands a knee strike, as the card instructed. Immediately, Suho falls to the ground, barely able to move. On his turn to attack, his team only gains the right to give a flick on the opponent's forehead. Soon, the boy thinks that luck is not on his side. However, Kim disagrees and says that this is not a bad card, and celebrates that it is his turn to attack. He also says that only those who have never been hit by such a blow scoff at this card. His opponent thinks the protagonist is bluffing, but he changes his mind the moment he is hit. Kim celebrates for finally being able to attack. Even Suho is surprised by what he saw. After being hit, the opponent wonders how the protagonist has such attacking power. Besides, this is the first time he has attacked. Then, Kim attacks again, this time with a punch. Right after, he makes a new attack, this time just with the tip of his thumb. However, that doesn't mean the pain was less. On the contrary, his opponent asked his brother to substitute him. But since his brother is the king, he chooses to stay where he is and leaves his twin on the front line. For his part, Suho thinks that his opponents see him as weak. After all, he is just a child. However, he is determined to endure until the end, no matter what happens. Since, if he is right in his deductions, this is the only way to win. It is not the absence of fear that motivates him, but rather the opposite. Even so, he thinks it took a lot of courage to be hit in place of someone else, even though it hurt quite a bit. In any case, Suho is determined to win this game. On the other side, his opponent is furious. After all, the game has turned, and he is getting beaten. For his part, the protagonist is loving this. Once again, he attacks and lands a right hook on the opponent, what threw him to the other side of the arena, and even hit his brother on impact of the rabbits with a single strike. The protagonist asks if this, by any chance, is against the rules. In response, the host says no, and furthermore, congratulates him on his victory. After that, Suho celebrates the win. Kim asks if, when he said he wanted to test something, this was what he had in mind. Suho replies that he had a hunch that if the king continued to play a defensive role, the attack card would be more effective, and in the end, he was right. He says that the king who orders the sacrifice will end up with no subjects, but by doing the opposite, he wins the battle. With that, the protagonist congratulates the boy's role. But Sohu raises a point. He says the game is not over yet, as they have not received their rewards. The host confirms and says that the final round is about to begin. He also says that now they will no longer have teams and must play individually for victory. He explains that the game consists of a rebellion, where the king must contain the turmoil of his subject. So, since they are the last two remaining, they will play against each other. Kim states he is surprised by this outcome, as he did not want to fight the boy. Unlike before, Suho also does not want to play. He has formed enough bonds with Kim that he does not want to fight against him, as in the end, only one will survive. But soon after, Kim slaps the boy. He tells the boy to stop the nonsense and face reality, because from now on, they are adversaries, and whoever falters will perish. Moreover, the protagonist claims he is not such a good person. The host says the game continues until one of the players perishes or gives up, and the king must receive the same number of attacks he ordered his subject to receive before. Suho does not feel well having to play against Kim. Moreover, he believes it is impossible to defeat him in a fight, even if he had a blade or something like that. Even if he gives up playing, he does not know what comes next, so he feels lost. Kim notices the boy's excitement and tells him to think of the most important person to him. He knows the boy has someone to fight for, so he tells him to use that as motivation and not to worry about the rest. He also says that it does not matter how tired or hesitant the boy is, as the one who needs him is waiting for him. Therefore, he should hurry to find her, otherwise he will lose the only person left from his family. Suho thinks about it and realizes that these words make sense. This then serves as motivation for him to fight. Kim says his pride would be hurt if he had to fight against the child, so he says he will not attack. Thus, if the boy manages to hit him just once, he will give up and grant him the victory. Suho asks if the protagonist is serious. Kim says yes and tells the boy to go all out. He knows very well that in a cruel world like this, there is no way to achieve your goals just with willpower or desperation. In the end, things like money and power can be used to protect someone dear, but what creates them are also willpower and desperation. Kim believes in these values and tries to pass them on to the boy. At every moment, he tells him not to give up, claiming that he will succeed, as long as he dedicates himself enough. Suho, however, cannot continue, even though he has reasons to do so. For his part, Kim reassures the boy and gives up the game, even though he is not defeated. Then the host says that the king has won and the game is over. Some time later, the boy receives some bandages but complains about the pain. Jin Young-cheo says that with the money he won, he could go to a hospital instead of complaining. Suho says that is not his style, so Jin Young-cheo asks how much he won. The boy says the amount was 700 million wons. In contrast, the protagonist lost 200 million, but at least he is alive, as he had to pay for that. Knowing Kim, Jin Young-cheo says he will find a way to recover the lost amount. Then the old man appears and asks why Kim lost on purpose. He replies that it just happened. Anyway, Gu Woo-nemo thanks him for sparing the boy. Kim asks if the boy is buying his freedom with the money he received. The old man says that, in fact, the boy bought his freedom with the 2 billion he won in advance, but he had to play against Kim, as a condition was stipulated. So, even with the money, he would not be freed unless he fulfilled the condition, and it was required that he finish in first place, which he, in a way, managed to do. In the end, the boy ended up with 700 million plus his freedom. But what irritates the old man is the fact that these people control the lives of others as they please. In the end, everything is at the discretion of the organizers. They have the capability and technology to hack and paralyze even the national system. The one who can control all our actions was just a toy in their hands. However, he remembers that Kim just saved someone from hell and asks how he wants to receive the 400 million, for he can pay in cash or in gold bars if Kim prefers. The protagonist is drooling upon hearing this, as gold bars are something he only encounters in movies. And since gold is a risk-free and highly liquid asset, he chooses to receive the gold bars. Gu Woo-nemo asks for a moment, and then returns with 5 kilograms of gold bars. Kim notes that only one of these bars is worth approximately 80 million, thus 5 of them are worth 400 million. However, upon seeing the real gold in front of him, he can only smile, and this serves as financial therapy for him. Even Jin Young-cheo is startled by the protagonist's joy and says he gets more than excited when it comes to money. Suho says that, despite this, Kim is a good person. But seeing Kim celebrate so much with the gold bars, Jin Young-cheo asks if the boy is sure about that. For his part, the protagonist says that the boy did a great job and mentions that if he wants help finding his sister, he can call him. With that, Suho thinks that, despite this eccentric behavior, deep down, Kim is a good person. Sometime later, they say their goodbyes. Then, the old man asks if the protagonist will join his organization. Kim says that, as everyone can see, he is greedy and wants to make more money. Gu Woo-nemo then says that sooner or later, they will have to work together again. The protagonist mentions that the old man could think a little about himself sometimes. Thus, they also say their goodbyes. 6 days after this meeting, a luxury car stops in front of an even more luxurious building, and from inside it, the protagonist steps out. He quickly heads to the bar of the place, as he is enjoying his more than 1 billion wons, not to mention the gold bars he received. Kim also stole the car and the watch from the president of his company, which, in total, are worth about 300 million. So, adding up his current assets, the value exceeds 2 billion, making the protagonist feel like a high-class prince. But one of the many changes in his life was a person he met days ago. In this same hotel bar, a woman approaches him and asks what the protagonist has planned for today. It is the first time he meets someone from the upper class, and he is actually enjoying it. Besides her attractive appearance, she is also a well-informed woman. And above all, Kim likes the way she smiles without any pretense. But he is not naive and wonders why she is interested in him in the first place. However, what truly bothers him is her terrible habit of drinking. And when she drinks, she starts to flirt more intensely. Kim thinks it is better to maintain a firm stance, as even though he has changed his life, he imagines that being firm in his convictions is the best thing to do. He knows he is facing someone who loses control when drinking, and especially, moments like this are the most dangerous. However, the needy woman uses all her charm to convince Kim to take her to his house. In the midst of an unusual situation in his routine, the protagonist finds himself lost and hardly knows where to start. After all, an hour earlier, they arrived in front of her friend's place. Kim was impressed before entering, as just the facade already demonstrates the luxury of the place. The woman says she lives there. Thus, the protagonist realizes that they indeed live in different worlds. After dropping her off in front of the building, Kim even tried to say goodbye and leave, but in the midst of that, it started to rain, and she invited him to come in to wait until the rain stopped. Soon, in the blink of an eye, the MC found himself in a situation he was not prepared for. Still, he tries to evade, saying that she is drunk. Although she denies it, the truth is clear to the protagonist. However, the situation changes when she tries to take Kim's glasses off. When trying to stop the worst from happening, Kim ends up putting her on the bed, and the situation turns even more in her favor. Kim's action is seen as an advance. However, he had no intention of doing that and keeps dodging her. But to his surprise, his friend begs him to make her forget everything. Kim notices that the lady falls asleep while crying. He realizes that her life must not be easy and becomes even more concerned. After that day, Kim kept in touch with his new friend. The rest of his routine also changed. He even started training the company's president to become a man of more value. And during breaks, he watches YouTube videos while eating snacks. Kim even began leaving work early to meet his friend. He thinks that, in the past, doing something like that was practically impossible. But the more time he spends by her side, Kim can't stop imagining that something bad might happen. Because the last time he did something similar, his co-worker got seriously injured. It reached the point where the protagonist considered not going out with his friend anymore. However, she caught him off guard and practically asked him out. Those words shook the protagonist to his core. Even wanting to accept, he refuses. His friend notices that Kim is not being sincere. She asks why he doesn't want her as a girlfriend. The protagonist would like to tell the truth, but he thinks it's safer to stay away from anyone who could become a target for his enemies. His main goal is to get out of these crazy games for good and, if possible, keep the money he earns in the process so that afterwards he can live a normal life. But until all this ends, anyone who lives by his side will have a hellish routine, just like his. However, as soon as the protagonist distances himself from his friend, he notices something different about her. The woman wears a system choker that alerts her she failed her mission and lost 300 million won. Soon, Kim realizes that she's also a player. He had never noticed because her device is different from the others. Her mission was to form a relationship with the protagonist within 10 days, but she just failed. So, since her disguise was exposed, she tells the truth, that she's been a player all this time. Seeing the protagonist's shock, she says he should know there are others like him out there and didn't think Kim would be so surprised. The surprise grows when the woman's system gives her a new mission: eliminate the protagonist. Kim is now a target, though he can barely process all the information. Either way, since she was rejected, she uses her anger to attack and throws spears toward the protagonist. Kim then realizes she's not just any woman. In fact, she's Waran, rank 22, a trained professional. The protagonist concludes that it'll be hard to deal with this situation empty-handed. So, the best thing he can do for now is run. Waran realizes she'll have to chase after her target. During the chase, Kim uses his resources and requests a random item for battle. Soon, his system alerts that a package will arrive shortly. Meanwhile, Waran searches for him during her hunt. Waran says she knows about Kim's strength and wants to know if he's stronger than her. But there's only one way to find out. They both need to fight to the end. However, when she attacks, Waran realizes she was deceived. The protagonist appeared on the opposite side from where she expected. Even so, she's skilled enough to handle it. Yet she's surprised when she attacks, because Kim appears wearing cut-resistant gloves and manages to grab her blades. The item the protagonist requested proves to be more useful than he expected. The organization sent the package through a drone, and now he can balance the game. Waran, in a way, even finds that interesting. Kim, in turn, says he's got something extra stored, because his gloves, besides being cut-resistant, also work as a 50,000-volt stun weapon. The woman is startled now. Kim takes the chance to ask if all the time they spent together, Waran had been acting. She asks if that really matters. The protagonist simply says that for playing with a man's feelings, her punishment will be receiving the biggest shock of her life. With that, Waran doesn't even know how to react. After this threat, Waran says that Kim keeps surprising her more and more. However, she asks if he'll be able to capture her. Then she moves so fast that she disappears from the protagonist's sight. While Kim wonders where his opponent went, she prepares to attack him. After all, this is a hunt where both their lives are at stake. But Waran is confident that she will come out victorious. She has been trained since childhood and has eliminated several targets since then. Throughout her career, she has never failed. Her codename is the same as the flower that symbolizes death, Spider Lily. Once a target is marked, they must perish. With that, Waran thinks the protagonist will just be another name on her list. But she ends up surprised to see Kim defending himself against her attacks. She has never encountered a target that matched her skills. Moreover, the protagonist even laughs at the situation. And in addition to catching the blades thrown at him, he fires them back. She narrowly avoids being hit. But instead of feeling fear, she is fascinated by facing an opponent like Kim. He, in turn, says there's no reason to continue and suggests letting it go. However, Waran is even more excited to keep fighting him. At this point, there are no arguments that will make her stop. So, all that's left for Kim is to keep defending himself. Waran intensifies her strikes. It doesn't take long for the protagonist to realize that a single mistake could be fatal. In this case, he decides to end it quickly. Kim grabs the blade, trying to destabilize Waran, but she manages to counterattack from the other side. Then, the protagonist thinks it's as if she anticipates his movements. After stepping back, Waran asks the protagonist who he really is. She says that, although she is having fun trying to eliminate him, she finds it strange that he isn't counterattacking. Then, she proposes a bet. If Kim wins, she will give him her apartment valued at 2.6 billion wons. However, if she wins, Her wish is for Kim Joo-hyuk to become her slave forever and obey all her orders. Hwa-ran says the protagonist can think of this as a system game, to which he can surrender if he prefers. Kim enjoys hearing the proposal, especially because of the value of the property. At that moment, Hwa-ran regrets making this offer, because Kim's reaction made it seem like she just struck a deal with the devil himself. In her moment of distraction, she loses sight of the protagonist. Soon, Kim appears behind her. Immediately, Hwa-ran freezes in shock, and she narrowly avoids being hit by the protagonist. The impact of Kim's gloves ended up striking the ground. Excited, he says he's close to having his own apartment in Seoul. The emotion that a hunter must avoid the most is fear. At that exact moment, Hwa-ran felt fear for the first time. Standing before the overwhelming potential and terrifying existence of the guy in front of her, her foundations were shaken. But one thing she realized, perhaps this man is the one she has been looking for. A man who would become stronger than her. However, while Hwa-ran was lost in wonder, the protagonist only wanted to know about his reward. But before he could touch his opponent, she surrenders. Even so, the protagonist claims there's no way to escape this. Then, the screams of pain after receiving a shock echo throughout the park. Sometime later, Hwa-ran wakes up. Not only that, but she realizes she is at home. Still confused, she tries to remember what happened. However, the protagonist approaches and says that this apartment is no longer hers. She then remembers the bet and knows she has lost her property. Hwa-ran says she admits defeat and will transfer ownership of the apartment to Kim, but she has one condition. The protagonist says that this isn't fair. After all, it wasn't in the agreement. Still, Hwa-ran states that the condition for him to live there is to live with her. Kim doesn't like hearing this condition. However, Hwa-ran argues that they didn't even sign a betting contract, so there's no problem in adding a condition. Moreover, she claims that if they stay together, they can share the necessary information, and she can even help with the games, if Kim wishes. After checking the latest apartment prices, she realizes that the property has appreciated and is now worth 3 billion. Upon hearing this, even reluctantly, the protagonist accepts the proposal. After all, his greed for money wouldn't let him refuse. For her part, Hwa-ran asks if they should sign a cohabitation contract. In her thoughts, she sees this as a way to keep Kim close. After all, he is her ideal type, a man stronger than her. In any case, an unusual agreement is made between a professional human hunter and a former special forces agent. Not to mention that the protagonist's system has already prepared a new mission for him. A story that always appears in webtoons and dramas is those involving fights among young people. School violence, a story in which Jean and his victims appear as main characters. The reason these stories are constantly published is because they happen infinitely in reality as well. The protagonist is certain of this statement. That's because he is the one suffering from school violence right now. His mission is to obey K's orders. If he hurts K or disobeys his commands, a random penalty will be applied. Disguised as a teenager, Kim didn't find it too difficult to look like a target. He simply wore his still-fitting school uniform and invented a nerdy character. He believes that just having a fragile appearance and acting stupidly will soon make him fresh meat for bullies. Kim did all this intending to confront his target. He even pretended to fall in front of the group of bullies, dropping his wallet in front of them. The protagonist, like others, seems like an easy prey, and this is his intention, because his target took the bait quite easily. K is actually named Kang Ji-tae, the leader of a gang of bullies who are quite mean just because. The protagonist's look of satisfaction is so great that he almost blows his disguise. Then he realizes he needs to stay in character for the plan to work. Soon after, the bullies grabbed him by the neck, and they even raised their hand to hit the protagonist. Kim then thinks he will have to give it his all in this act. So, he behaves the way the aggressors want, and even hands over his money to them. In character, he says he will give them everything they want, as long as he doesn't get beaten. His performance was so exaggerated that the bully was even startled. In any case, they asked for Kim's contact, claiming they would call later if they needed him. And if he didn't answer, they said the consequences would be severe. As he is portraying an easy target, Kim does what they want. But he knows very well that, in reality, it is the bullies who are acting as he wants, and not the other way around. Feigning friendliness, Kang Ji-tae even tells his companions not to be too rough. He said they should prepare an introduction ceremony for their new friend, where there is already a place set up. Then, at night, they prepare a party. To have fun, one of the guys makes a truly disgusting mixture, and tries to force Kim to drink it, saying that otherwise, he will suffer a penalty. He also says this is part of his initiation. Another boy was used as an example by them, and ended up getting beaten quite a bit. Kim saw everything up close and knew how cruel these bullies could be, but he doesn't find it pleasant to witness a situation like this. Jian-woo, the boy who is getting beaten, is the target this time. The bullies are trying to turn him into an obedient dog, and to do that, they beat him a lot. Kim watches everything closely but is bothered, to the point of grabbing the disgusting drink and throwing it in the aggressor's face. Apologizing, Kim claims he was so scared that he accidentally spilled the drink on the guy. Extremely irritated, the bully grabs the protagonist and is about to hit him. However, Kang Ji-tae intervened, claiming this was an important day. He then told his subordinate to go prepare the arrangements. As expected, Kim realizes that the others obey Kang Ji-tae. After all, he is the leader. Next, the guy says the last guest is arriving and can hear his footsteps approaching. After that, Jian-woo's father arrives home. But instead of finding his son alone as usual, he finds him with the others. Obviously, Jian-woo is forced into this and is not feeling comfortable at all. However, from his father's perspective, the son is just celebrating his birthday with his friends. The boy's father laments not having done anything for his son's birthday but thanks his friends for doing this for him. For his part, Kang Ji-tae says that Jian-woo's father has nothing to worry about. After all, he and the others take very good care of the boy. With no alternatives, wearing a super forced smile, Jian-woo is compelled to agree with these words. However, the only one who still hasn't quite grasped the situation is the protagonist. He wonders why these bullies are going so far as to involve the victim's family. Jian-woo's father says it is very rare to see his son with friends and thanks Kang Ji-tae for that. In fact, he takes out some money and says it is not much, but tells Kang Ji-tae to use it for him and his son, along with the others, to have a little fun. However, Kang Ji-tae does not accept. After all, he has something more sinister in mind. He sees a boxing equipment in the house, and says he saw Jian-woo's father the other day at the gym, claiming it must be difficult to manage a place like that. Hearing this makes Jian-woo feel somewhat embarrassed, until one of the boys decides to provoke him further, asking if Jian-woo would let him hit his father for 10,000 wons. This whole situation is quite stressful. After all, these bullies are treating their victims like lab rats and observing their reactions for entertainment. But unable to do anything, Jian-woo just steps out to get some fresh air. Shortly after, the protagonist approaches and asks if he is okay. After all, it can't be easy to endure all this abuse all day long. Jian-woo says he will try to transfer to another school soon and recommends that the protagonist do the same, as that is the only way to get rid of someone like Kang Ji-tae. Jian says that Kang Ji-tae picks someone as a target and tries to turn the person into a pet, not to get what he wants. Kim asks what the boy's greatest weakness is. He says it is his family, as his mother is hospitalized at Kang Ji-tae's father's hospital. Kang Ji-tae knows that the expenses of a place like that are not cheap, so he talked to his father to ease Jian-woo's mother's situation, until they have money to pay for the surgery, but in return, he has been picking on the boy, using this situation as an excuse. Jian-woo claims that he can only endure this situation because of his mother. However, the protagonist says he cannot keep going through this. He also says that if it continues like this, Jian-woo might end up dying of frustration. The boy asks what the protagonist is talking about. Kim then reveals that he actually has a lot of money and asks the boy for a chance to help him reverse the situation he is in. In his new home, the protagonist prepares to leave. Meanwhile, he is deep in thought about his current mission, until Hwa-ran approaches him and asks what is bothering him. Kim gets quite startled by her sudden appearance, and asks why she showed up out of nowhere. Hwa-ran simply says that they are living together now, so something like this can happen frequently. Not only that, but she calls him partner and says that Kim can vent about anything with her. The protagonist says he already has enough headaches without her, so he tells Hwa-ran not to make things worse. Judging his clothes, Hwa-ran says that Kim must be dealing with students, and then warns him that there are various ways to eliminate a target and lists her favorites. However, Kim says this is not a mission to eliminate a target, and that he can definitely handle it on his own, so he doesn't want her help. Next, Kim receives a message from one of the boys in the gang and thinks he might still be angry for getting alcohol thrown in his face. However, the protagonist knows he doesn't need to care about that and can also use it to his advantage. Soon, he prepares to leave, and Hwa-ran asks if Kim is going to school. If that's the case, she can prepare breakfast. However, this irritates Kim. He says he is not hungry and leaves for his mission. Hwa-ran then says that, not only in appearance but even in personality, Kim is returning to his puberty state. At another moment, a girl tries to walk away, but the obnoxious boy from the group insists on getting her number, claiming he doesn't want her money, just her contact. The girl rejects him and tries to walk away. Angrily, the obnoxious boy raises his hand to hit her, saying he hates it when girls are in their more irritable days. Immediately, the defenseless girl braces for the worst. However, something surprising happens. Kim arrives practically at lightning speed and punches the obnoxious boy in the abdomen, making him scream in pain. With that, Kim says he has two options. The boy can be hospitalized after a session of closed fist massages, or he can do him a favor. He also says that if it's hard to decide, maybe a new blow will help the obnoxious boy clear his mind. Terrified, the boy says he doesn't need that and will do whatever the protagonist wants. Kim throws some money on the ground and says he doesn't need anything too laborious. He simply says that the obnoxious boy needs to take care of that money and must keep everything a secret. The obnoxious boy is unsure if that's all there is to it. Kim claims it is, saying that from now on, he just needs to act as naturally as possible. He asks where the others are. The boy says they are at their base, so the protagonist asks to go there. Kim thinks his opponents are just students, so it's not very difficult to deal with these losers, and everything is going according to his plan. After arriving at the base, the gang leader was attacking Jian-woo, and upon seeing Kim, he says it's his turn to hit the weaker one. At that moment, the protagonist remembers the conversation they had on the rooftop. Jian-woo warned him that this could happen and said that if Kang Ji-tae ordered it, Kim should obey. He also said that if it came to taking a beating, he would endure it, no matter what happened. Back in the present, Kim approaches Jian-woo. However, he pretends he can't hit him. This confuses the cocky boy, as he still hasn't understood Kim's true intentions. For his part, the leader tells Lee Jin-hyuk, the cocky boy, to teach the protagonist how to hit someone. This time, the cocky boy doesn't want to, as he knows there could be consequences. But his leader says he always loves hitting losers. So, he doesn't understand his excitement. Jin-hyuk tries to disguise it. However, this only serves to irritate Kang Ji-tae, and he asks if Jin is really going to disobey an order. Jin Hyuk knows this won't end well. After all, he has already discovered that the protagonist is just pretending to be weak. He just doesn't know if he's dealing with someone foolish or insane. However, before he can hit him, Kim says that Lee Jin Hyuk promised not to hit him if he earned his money behind Kang Ji-tae's back. Startled, Jin Hyuk says he doesn't know what he's talking about. The protagonist continues with the act, claiming that Lee Jin Hyuk stated that his leader wasn't special and that he would protect him from him in exchange for money. Kim calls him a liar and demands his money back. Lee Jin Hyuk asserts that he would never do something like that and tries to push him away. But in the confusion, the money the protagonist gave to the boy earlier spreads everywhere. Soon, Kang Ji-tae starts to take this seriously. He says that if this is true, his ally is trying to make money without his knowledge. Lee Jin Hyuk tries to argue, saying it's not quite like that. However, with a frightening look, Kang Ji-tae asks if he is appearing as some kind of clown or something. Sometime later, Lee Jin Hyuk is left in a bad state. Kang says that for this reason, he hates beggars and claims that his mood has been ruined. Then, he says he will leave and asks the other ally to clean up this mess, saying that he can keep the scattered money as a reward. As soon as the leader leaves, the other ally thinks that with so much money, Kim must have rich relatives or something. He approaches the protagonist and asks if he really gave so much money to Lee Jin Hyuk just for protection, because he sees that there are approximately 3 million wons there and didn't know anyone would pay so much just to avoid getting beaten. Then, he says he is better than Lee Jin Hyuk and that he would easily fight Kang for a reward like that. Kim then says that if that's the case, he can leave that money with him under the same agreement he made with Lee Jin Hyuk. Not only that, but he says he can increase the amount to 5 million, and asks if, with this amount, the boy agrees to do him a favor. Sometime later, the protagonist goes to a park with Jian-woo. The boy receives a backpack from Kim and asks what's inside it. Kim says this is what Jian-woo's mother needs, the money for her surgery. Jian-woo feels a bit embarrassed to accept. Besides, he doesn't know how Kim has so much money and also asks why he is giving such a large amount to someone he just met. Kim says he has much more money than this and doesn't mind sharing a little. Jian-woo is doubtful if this is all true. Being honest, the protagonist says he can't reveal more than that, but the reason he is giving this money to Jian-woo is quite simple. The protagonist says that Jian-woo is admirable, as he is surviving amidst chaos. Not only that, but until now he hasn't had anyone who could truly help him. Therefore, Kim wants to be that person and states that his role is to show that not only bad things happen in life, as good things can happen sometimes. He says that with this money, Jian-woo will be able to take his mother to the best hospital and give her the best treatment. Moved, Jian-woo starts to cry. Kim, for his part, says he wants to hear the whole story from the boy and asks him to tell everything. Still emotional, Jian-woo shares his journey up to that point with the protagonist. 2 days later, at a boxing gym, Kang's henchman appears, as Kim lured him in with a promise of money. Then, the protagonist introduces himself. In turn, the henchman asks why he was called. Kim challenges him to a fight, saying he will reward him with 5 million wons, as promised, if he wins. The henchman understands he will make easy money and asks if he just needs to win the fight to keep the money. Kim says yes, but reveals that, in fact, it will be Jian-woo who fights the henchman. Immediately, the henchman starts laughing, thinking he would never lose to someone like Jian-woo. He says that Jian-woo has been avoiding the group's calls for a while, concluding that he must have been learning boxing all this time. However, instead of feeling intimidated, Jian-woo thinks it was a waste of time, even without knowing where the kid got the confidence to challenge him. He still believes he will defeat him and, on top of that, win a good amount of money. Then, the two step into the ring. The protagonist reassures the kid and tells him to stay focused. Meanwhile, the opponent scoffs at Jian-woo, as he always has. He knows that Jian-woo's father is a fighter and boxing coach, but concludes that someone like Jian-woo, a punching bag, can't be good at fighting. Soon after, the fight begins, and the bully charges at the kid, trying to take him out with a single blow. But to his surprise, Jian-woo dodges the attack. Not only that, but he keeps dodging constantly. Tired, Jian-woo's opponent realizes that the kid has evaded all his punches, and he doesn't know how he managed to do that. On the other hand, Kim imagines that the henchman is completely clueless and must be wondering how things could change in just a few days. This is only because he doesn't know that Jian-woo has a body that can withstand many blows, and that he was strong from the very beginning. The burst punching bags at his father's boxing gym made the protagonist realize this. Jian-woo was just holding back, so Kim merely helped him break free from the shackles that bound him. His fists, which were once tied, are now free. Kim just needed to hand over the money and provide the right motivation for Jian-woo. During their conversation, Jian-woo revealed that he had used his fists once. He was trying to save a robbery victim, but after realizing he could kill someone with his own fists, he became scared. Since then, he refused to use them. Kim noticed that Jian-woo had a trauma and offered to help him break free from it. The kid didn't know if that was possible. However, the protagonist took on the role of an instructor, like those in the army. Then, he began calling Jian-woo recruit, and said that from that moment on, the kid should say, "Yes, sir," to all the instructions he received. Kim put all his military knowledge and experience into practice to pull the kid out of his comfort zone and get him back on track. He wanted to remove all fears from Jian-woo's mind and leave only what empowered him. At first, the training was a bit tough, but gradually, Jian-woo began to feel the positive effects, and the fear that once held him back became the strength that now motivates him. Back in the fight, Jian-woo stops dodging, and for the first time, he attacks one of his aggressors, making him kiss the canvas. Seeing this happen was, in a way, liberating for Jian-woo. Emotional, he says he wants to continue boxing from now on, and thanks the protagonist for his help. Amidst this, Kang Ji-tae appears, saying that Moon Dae was acting strangely, so he decided to follow him. He just didn't expect him to be having fun. Kang Ji-tae says he has been to this gym before but claims this place is terrible. He also says he witnessed Jian-woo break free from his trauma. Kang Ji-tae discovered that the kid's mother is going to have surgery at another hospital, although he doesn't know how he got the money. He claims it's a bit sad not to be able to play with his favorite punching bag anymore, but instead, he says he will go to the kid's father and make him an offer. For his part, Jian-woo tells Kang Ji-tae to put on a pair of gloves and step into the ring, so they can settle their differences once and for all. They have known each other for a long time. They are childhood friends, and until then, they had a good relationship. However, they were rivals in the same dream, but it reached a point where Jian-woo surpassed his friend in boxing. Then Kang began to see his friend in a different light, a look of envy for not being as good as him. One day, Kang Ji-tae got irritated because Jian-woo was going easy on him during training. His friend said it was not his intention to hurt him. However, Kang felt as if Jian-woo looked down on him, as if he felt superior, but only Kang thought that, for Jian-woo actually did not see him as inferior or anything like that. Even so, Kang decided to quit boxing, and directed his anger towards bothering others, and he became a sort of teenage gangster. It didn't take long for him to form his own group, and his time as a boxer earned him respect from others. However, one time, his subordinates began to argue about whether there was anyone stronger than Kang, until one of them mentioned the boxing gym and its owner, where his son was a promising young boxer, Choi Jian-woo. However, Lee Jin-hyuk said that the kid had quit boxing after an accident, where he intervened in a robbery and ended up accidentally killing the assailant. Due to the shock, he left the gym. After hearing this, Kang came to a conclusion. Someone's sadness became his joy, for he finally got what he wanted. Back to the present, the fight between them begins. Releasing all his pent-up anger, Kang wanted to finally see Jian-woo crawling at his feet. But in turn, Jian-woo just wanted to stop the bullying and resolve what was left unresolved between them. When they met again after some time, at Kang's request, he had told Jian-woo that the hospital where his mother was belonged to his father, and convinced him to lower the expenses. Kang used his former friend's vulnerability to pretend to care for him, but his intentions were more sinister, for he said that in return, Jian-woo should repay him by obeying him from then on. Otherwise, his mother's situation in the hospital could change. Kang told Jian-woo that all he needed to do was obey him, and then his mother would have what she needed. To demonstrate that he had control over Jian-woo, Kang asked him to watch what was about to happen. Then, he went to the boy's father and handed him money. Jian-woo's father was waiting across the street with boxing equipment. Not only that, but he was taking hits for some change. And seeing this, Jian-woo lost his sense of reality. For Kang was using his family as leverage, and this made him feel like a cowardly son. Unaware of what was happening, both the father and Jian-woo saw him that day. The old man told his son that he didn't expect to find him there, but he told the boy not to worry about how he found a way to make money, for he claimed that no one could hurt him or anything like that, as he knew what he was doing. Even hearing this, Jian-woo did not feel comfortable knowing about his father's situation, which made him feel even worse. Therefore, he took a lot of hits until a certain moment. However, Jian-woo is motivated enough not to let that happen anymore, for he never wants to feel the same sensation from that moment again. From now on, he does not want to be humiliated anymore. Kang is feeling firsthand what he made his former friend go through. Even so, Jian-woo tells him to get up, for he is not done with him yet. Irritated, Kang Ji-tae still seeks revenge, but the anger he feels takes away his concentration, making him an easy target. However, every time he falls to the ground, Jian tells him to get up, for he does not want to stop fighting until he feels satisfied. Kang Ji-tae's pride prevents him from stopping the fight, and his opponent knows this well. However, knowing he cannot win fairly, Kang pulls a blade, claiming he will make Jian-woo quit boxing forever. Half surprised, Jian-woo looks ahead and asks what he is doing. His opponent thinks he has scared Jian-woo, but the boy was not talking to Kang. The protagonist approaches Kang, saying that he has crossed the line. Kang then tries to hit the protagonist. However, Kim is much faster than him, and he managed to disarm Kang with extreme ease. Astonished, Kang asks how Kim managed to do that. Irritated, he calls Kim a loser, saying he should return his knife. However, the protagonist finally drops the act and reveals he is not a loser. Kang becomes even more frightened, as he no longer knows who he is facing, and quickly tells Kim to stay away from him. However, the protagonist states that he will now be Kang's adversary. Shortly after, Kang becomes unrecognizable after taking a beating. Kim, for his part, says that he has crossed all possible limits, and only got what he deserved. The protagonist's system alerts him that he has failed his mission and a penalty will be applied soon. But on the other hand, he does not regret it, and is ready for whatever comes next. Jian-woo was shocked to see Kim fight for the first time. He asks if Kim is some kind of professional boxer or something like that. The boy says it must be that, because otherwise there would be no way Kim could fight like that, aside from all the psychological training they had together. Unable to tell the truth, Kim finds a way to dodge the question and ends up confirming what the boy said about him. In any case, Jian-woo thanks him for the help, but claims he doesn't know how to repay it. However, Kim says the boy doesn't need to do that, and only helped him because he reminds him of his younger self. He also says that Jian-woo can repay the help by being successful from now on. The value of money can vary depending on the person who received it. For some, it is a power to stand out. For others, it is an opportunity to live a new life. In this way, money is a commodity that satisfies various human desires. That is why many people pursue it, including the most dangerous people. And for this same reason, the punishment was applied to the protagonist, and hunters began to chase him. After a while, the protagonist returns to his new apartment. He takes the opportunity to enjoy a nice meal through room service. As he savors his dinner, he thinks that earning money is worth it, precisely for benefits like this, because it is through the money he earns that such things are possible. The protagonist thinks that he now has 100 billion wons for his retirement, and all he needs to do is retire safely. Amidst this, a knife is thrown in his direction, but Kim manages to defend himself. On the other side, Waran, who threw the knife, says she loves the way Kim enjoys life. She also says she is starting to see results in her recent training. For his part, the protagonist says he does not feel comfortable knowing that she tries to catch him off guard every day and tries to convince her to stop. However, Waran says her desire is to become the best hunter in the world and thinks she can only achieve that by surpassing Kim Joo-hyuk. Tired, Kim says he doesn't want to talk anymore. However, Waran insists on knowing how his mission went. Kim hesitates to answer the question. Soon, Waran concludes that he failed in his objective and says she could have helped him if she had known he wouldn't manage. In fact, she suddenly becomes excited, wondering what the penalty applied to the protagonist will be. Irritated, Kim puts a piece of meat in her mouth to make Waran shut up. But then he asks what Waran knows about the hunters. After chewing and swallowing the meat, Waran says that hunters have only one goal: to eliminate their targets. Usually, their mission is to hunt another participant who has failed in their mission. They receive a name and the amount the target has in their account, so whoever successfully hunts gets the amount belonging to the defeated target. Kim asks if there are any special participants. Waran says there are special and regular participants. The difference between the two is usually their equipment and strength. However, she cannot say how many there are, and even if she knew, she wouldn't tell Kim. After all, he has to figure it out on his own. But one thing is certain. She asserts that if Kim lets his guard down for even a moment, he will perish at the hands of enemies, as there are plenty of crazies in this game. Then, she tells the protagonist to do his best to stay alive. Now, she says she will take her leave, as she has work to do. However, the protagonist claims that she is just saying whatever comes to her mind and does not take her words very seriously. Nevertheless, in light of everything that has been said, Kim knows one thing is true: he cannot let his guard down, so he needs to stay alert. A little later, he wonders what would be the best way to escape from the hunters. Then, he concludes that the best way is to keep moving, so he gets into his car. However, as soon as he starts the engine, another car crashes into his. On the other side, a hunter says he has finally found the protagonist. Kim becomes extremely irritated upon seeing his broken car. Then, he gets out of the vehicle to confront the situation. However, immediately, a rope is tied around his neck. The hunter pulls the noose, trying to destabilize Kim. And just when he thought he had captured him, he is surprised, for the protagonist managed to avoid being caught. Instead, he used the enemy's rope to his advantage. Seeing this, the hunter realizes he is not facing just any opponent. Kim, for his part, asks if the hunter isn't going to introduce himself. His enemy says that words are unnecessary in moments like this. The protagonist then changes the question and asks how many targets he has eliminated. For his part, the enemy states that a true hunter does not count the number of his prey. In that case, Kim says that as prey, he will not make the hunter's job easier. Again, the enemy throws his rope, but the protagonist manages to dodge and continues running towards him. After that, Kim manages to get closer to the enemy and knocks him down with a shove. Then, the protagonist claims that the hunt is over. However, the hunter starts to laugh, something the protagonist does not understand. Soon, the hunter says that a prey never realizes it is being hunted until it is captured by the hunter. At that moment, another person approaches and hits the protagonist with a dart. The hooded hunter says this is a paralyzing dart, and the body of his target will become completely immobile in a few moments. However, he claims that the protagonist's mind will remain intact. Nevertheless, Kim says he doesn't feel the effects yet, and besides, he is quite tolerant of such things. Recently, he was hit by a dart for the first time, which made him more resilient to poisons. The hooded one definitely did not expect that. Kim says that the hunter claimed that his prey never knows when it is being hunted. However, he asserts that his way of hunting is different, for he finds it much more exciting when his prey knows it is being hunted, to the despair of the other hunters. Instead of hunting, now they are the ones being hunted. Kim attacks using his shock gloves, but the previously captured hunter manages to escape. Despite this, the hunter wonders how the protagonist can still move even after being hit with a paralyzing dart. Not only that, but the fact that the protagonist is smiling is what draws the most attention. Kim is a different kind of prey than all the others the hunter has faced. Even so, he does not back down. After the protagonist attacks, the hunter dodges and tries to capture his target by the foot. Unlike the first time, now he succeeds. Kim's leg is tied up, and he ends up having his sense of gravity destabilized. With that, the hunter believes it will be easier to finish his job. However, his trap backfires, for Kim comes in with a two-footed kick to the enemy's face. The protagonist used the enemy's force as a springboard to counterattack. Doing so, he knocks his opponent down again. But this hunter is not the only one. The other hunter attacks, firing more darts, hitting the protagonist. He says that if one dart wasn't enough, he can shoot more darts with different poisons, for he believes that, even being tolerant, there is no way someone can resist various types of different poisons. Meanwhile, the rope hunter holds Kim, preventing him from escaping. The hunter thinks that while he restricts the protagonist's movements, the other hunter can hit him, and thus, they both capture the target. Moreover, they believe that by combining their skills, there is no way a prey can escape, just like a spider that traps its prey in a web and then uses its venom against it. In the same way, they believe what happened to the protagonist, a fly that fell into an infallible hunting method. However, when they think they are at an advantage, Kim reveals that he caught the darts before they hit him, leaving the hunters dumbfounded. The protagonist says that their combination of attacks is too obvious not to notice. Kim also mentions that he was keeping an eye on the hooded one the entire time he was fighting the other hunter, so he saw exactly the moment he fired his darts. The rope hunter cannot comprehend this, as he has never seen a target behave this way. For his part, Kim says that unlike him, his opponent must not be resistant to poisons, and he wants to see how he reacts to being hit by darts. The hunter manages to dodge, but in doing so, he becomes vulnerable to other attacks. That was exactly what the protagonist wanted. He hit his enemy squarely. Not only that, but he also took possession of his rope, and in doing so, he aims at the other hunter. The hooded one even tries to run. However, he ends up being lassoed by the protagonist. After preventing the enemy from escaping, Kim pulls the hooded one closer, and takes the opportunity to land a solid shock punch on him. The opponent has no chance to react. Moreover, the punch left him completely incapacitated to continue fighting. Logo, Kim asks what it feels like to be a target. Indignant, the hunter with the lasso asks the protagonist who he is. However, Kim says that he is the one asking the questions, and then asks the hunter if he has any companions. The hunter replies that he does and warns the protagonist to be careful, as this particular hunter is famous among them. He also says that the protagonist should be afraid, because compared to this hunter, he is nothing. Then, the protagonist concludes that this hunter is merely a distraction and takes the opportunity to put him to sleep. Pausing to think about what the hunter said, Kim realizes that his location has been compromised and that more hunters will likely appear. So, he thinks it makes no sense to run. Instead, he wants to find an appropriate place to fight against his guest. The protagonist ends up in an abandoned warehouse, and waits for over an hour, but he is getting bored, because so far, the hunter has not shown up. Kim tries to imagine what kind of weapon his enemy will use against him, and hopes it will be something unusual that makes the fight interesting. However, the man in front of him was not normal. Not only that, but the protagonist felt fear from his mere presence, because the man was his childhood friend. Like test subjects in a facility, they had both promised to survive together, but the only one who survived was Kim. He thought his friend had died, so he asks how he managed to survive the fire. His childhood friend asks if the protagonist knows him. He says yes, mentions that he is Kim Joo-hyuk, and calls his old friend by name, Cha Tae-hwan. However, unlike the protagonist, Cha Tae-hwan claims not to know him and points his gun at Kim, which leaves him quite confused. Cha Tae-hwan fires at the protagonist, which makes Kim realize that he cannot let his guard down, or he will be hit. His opponent is using a firearm, but through the sound of the shot, Kim identifies that the ammunition is not real. It is probably a non-lethal projectile. He thinks that the organization must prohibit real firearms, which is good. However, being hit by a single shot, even if non-lethal, means he loses the battle. Thus, the protagonist concludes that he must be as careful as possible. Kim tries to talk to Cha Tae-hwan and asks if he has lost his memory. Meanwhile, he thinks of a way to win the game, so he tries to distract his opponent. However, he wants to do this in a non-lethal way, as he feels he owes his childhood friend. When they were kids, Cha Tae-hwan always took care of Kim. After all, they only had each other, because they were involuntary human test subjects in experiments involving brain waves and hormones released when humans are under extreme stress. By doing this, the scientists were able to control the children's physical abilities beyond their limits, making them endure all kinds of pain. Intense routines were their daily life in the lab, but surviving outside was the value of their existence. They wanted to leave, but they had unwittingly become addicted to stimulants. So, they knew that the only way out of this was to log off from the server called life. But the protagonist thought Cha Tae-hwan was different. Among all the others, he was the only one who still had hope. Thus, upon hearing comforting words from him, Kim also began to have hope, and that motivated him to stay alive. However, the experiments became increasingly severe, and eventually, everyone began to suffer the side effects. They started to have permanent bodily changes, and some even did not survive. In the end, only the two of them remained. However, Cha Tae-hwan believed that he and his friend would be freed, as he heard from the scientists that the experiments would be terminated. Kim then asked what Cha Tae-hwan would like to do once they got out of there. Cha Tae-hwan said he would like to hear the sound of the waves, as he once heard it with his mother, and just imagining what they are like, he wishes to hear the sound again. He asked what Kim would like to do. For his part, the protagonist said that his wish was to become rich, as he believed that by having a lot of money, he could be happy. Because rich people should not go hungry, much less get sick. Thus, there is no way someone like that could be sad. He also knew that his mother was outside and wanted to find her. At that moment, Cha Tae-hwan said that was great. And when they got out, he would also like to be rich, so they could enjoy life together. Kim asks what the sound of the sea is like. Cha Tae-hwan is impressed by the fact that he has never heard it. Then, he asks him to close his eyes and tries to describe with words what he remembers of the sound. Being guided by his friend, Kim manages to catch a mere glimpse of what the sound of the waves would be like. But the sound he actually ended up hearing was not something so pleasant. For near the cells, some men poured gasoline, and they were ordered to set it on fire. After all, the scientists were trying to erase their traces. And for that, they needed to eliminate all evidence of what they had done. In this, the children were caught by surprise. Desperate, Kim saw no alternatives for escape, but he had his friend by his side. Cha Tae-hwan had prepared an escape route with an object he secretly took from the laboratory. So, he told his friend that they needed to be quick if they wanted to escape alive. Kim was the first to pass through the hole. But when talking to his friend, Cha Tae-hwan simply told him to run away. He claimed he was too big to pass through the hole and that there was no more time to escape, so he wanted Kim not to be left behind with him. Cha Tae-hwan told his friend not to waste this chance, and asked him to enjoy life. Kim didn't want to leave and abandon his friend. However, Cha Tae-hwan insisted that he leave, otherwise, his sacrifice would be in vain, and he wanted at least one of them to have the longed for freedom. Besides teaching him to have hope, Cha Tae-hwan also gave the protagonist the opportunity to live through his sacrifice. However, it was hard for him to survive without his best friend by his side. Back in the present, Kim claims he doesn't know how Cha Tae-hwan survived, but he says he is happy that he is alive. He also says there was nothing he could do, but he affirms that he always thought of his friend, even after so much time. However, Cha Tae-hwan claims he doesn't know what the protagonist is talking about. Kim then says he needs to recover his memory. He knows he is not in a position to speak and also doesn't know how to apologize or thank. However, he says that the only way to clarify things is to subdue Cha Tae-hwan, so he apologizes in advance for what will happen from now on. The protagonist then disappears from Cha Tae-hwan's sight, causing his opponent to shoot in an attempt to hit him. However, Cha Tae-hwan only hits the protagonist's vest. Kim took advantage of this moment of distraction and threw some blades in the direction of his rival. With this, he interrupted the gunfire, and soon after, tried to get closer to Cha Tae-hwan. Before the opponent could fire again, Kim managed to hold his hand and stopped him. Then he says he doesn't like knowing this side of his friend. But probably, from the moment they both entered that place, they were destined to be hunting machines. Thus, the protagonist believes there is only one way to end this. So he uses his gloves to shock his opponent. But contrary to all his expectations, Cha Tae-hwan feels no pain from the shock. In addition to resisting, he counterattacks with a punch and hits the protagonist squarely. With this, Kim says there is nothing more he can do, so all that's left is to fight until only one remains standing. He then takes the weapon from his opponent's hand and starts hitting with his shock glove. Cha Tae-hwan says the protagonist is well trained. Kim says the same and asks if his old friend has become a mercenary or something like that. Upon hearing this, Cha Tae-hwan asks why the protagonist speaks to him as if he knows him. He also says he doesn't know anyone as ugly as the protagonist. Otherwise, he would surely remember him. Kim doesn't like being called ugly, so he says that Cha Tae-hwan needs some good shock therapy to recover his memory. For Cha Tae-hwan, once he receives a target, he needs to complete the mission at any cost. His past no longer matters. Besides, he hasn't created a future worth admiring. Cha Tae-hwan is content to live day by day. That is until now, because the moment the protagonist said his name, it somehow shook his foundations, as he wants to know who this man in front of him is. Moreover, he wants to know how he knows him, and knows his name. After all, unlike the protagonist, Cha Tae-hwan truly doesn't remember his past. After being disarmed by the protagonist, the two begin to fight hand to hand. Kim uses his shock gloves. However, his opponent protects himself from the attacks without feeling pain. The protagonist says this is not the first time they have fought each other, as in the past. To test the disparity between two subjects, they had to undergo the test. However, Cha Tae-hwan claims he doesn't remember anything. So, Kim tells them to keep fighting, as this way, his old friend might end up remembering something. In turn, Cha Tae-hwan claims he will finish off the protagonist before that happens. Kim says he is waiting for that to happen. Soon, Cha Tae-hwan charges in for the attack, this time with a blade. To Kim's surprise, his opponent is much faster now, and he is also more precise in his attacks. With his knife, he indeed attacks the protagonist, trying to seriously injure him. However, Kim is holding back, as he does not want to do the same to his old friend. At every moment, he breaks the tension of the fight, and throws out some catchphrases to his opponent, hoping to make him regain his memory. However, this is only serving to make Cha Tae-hwan even more irritated. He thinks the protagonist is ignorant when it comes to fighting, as he ignores risks and remains unprotected against attacks. As a result, Cha Tae-hwan lands a kick, which hits the protagonist squarely. Not only that, but now that he has destabilized his opponent, Cha Tae-hwan approaches and puts his knife to the protagonist's throat. However, Kim receives a superficial cut but manages to protect himself in time. Not only that, but he celebrates, as he has his opponent right where he wants him. Then, he lands a blow on Cha Tae-hwan, which sends him flying and disarms him. But as he gets close enough, Cha Tae-hwan says he saw something: the protagonist's red eyes. He says that his opponent has the same look as he does and admits that they may share similar traits, but that does not mean he cares about his past. Cha Tae-hwan believes that even if he knew about his past, it wouldn't change anything. After all, a hunting machine like him doesn't need to have feelings, as his only goal is to eliminate his targets. For his part, Kim says that Cha Tae-hwan is the strongest person he knows and that he has learned to have hope because of him. Once again, Cha Tae-hwan claims he is not interested in hearing about these silly stories. Then, he starts attacking the protagonist again, even though he does not know what happened to his friend after that day. Kim does not give up on him, as this does not eliminate the fact that Cha Tae-hwan is alive. So if his old friend went through hell, he wants to be the one to rescue him, since one day he was in despair, and Cha Tae-hwan himself taught him to have hope. With that, Kim says that he and Cha Tae-hwan were in the same laboratory and were subjects of the same projects. Still, Cha Tae-hwan claims he does not understand his past, just as the protagonist does not understand his present. He also says that if they were both raised together in the same experiment, then the protagonist was also created to become a hunting machine, just like him. Then Cha Tae-hwan says that maybe that is the reason Kim has become his target. Before he continues, a drone from the organization appears and says that his mission has been cancelled. He throws a smoke grenade and says that they both need to disperse immediately. Kim does not understand why this is happening out of nowhere, but Cha Tae-hwan says that the administration interfered in the game, and there is no way for them to continue. So, he decides to leave, but the protagonist insists that his old friends stay, as they have not finished talking. From above, the drone observes everything. While watching the protagonist on the battlefield, the masked man says he made some adjustments on his own and that the protagonist might not like it when he finds out. Therefore, he needs him to agree to his plan. Amidst the smoke, Kim can only think of one thing: the last phrase his old friend said about them being raised to be hunting machines. This makes him start to question if the same people responsible for the laboratory where he was created are the ones behind the administration of this game. Back home, the protagonist still reflects on what happened. He thinks he has always been optimistic about life, but because of his dark past, Kim always hides the scars that were left on his body. Even after escaping captivity, the memories of what he went through still lingered in his mind. He ran until he was exhausted, as far away from the laboratory, and woke up in a house in the middle of the mountains. The man who found him took care of him. In fact, this man was quite peculiar. When Kim woke up, the man said that since he saved him, the boy should obey him from that moment on. This was the closest thing to a relative that Kim ever had. This man taught him how to hunt, among other things. He passed on all his knowledge, although at that time the protagonist did not fully understand things. Once, his mentor said that there was a lot of suffering in the world, and to overcome it, Kim needed to become stronger. This was the central point of all the teachings that the man wanted to convey. Year after year, he trained with the protagonist and helped him grow even stronger, until one beautiful day, this man disappeared. The protagonist could no longer find his master. Instead, he encountered a member of the special forces named Kim Jin-tae. In turn, the agent said that the protagonist's master had left without explanation and only asked him to take care of the boy. He also asked him to enroll the protagonist in a school and give him a normal life. Kim Joo-hyuk listened to all this in surprise, but he kept his emotions in check and focused on his goal. With that, he concluded that he wanted more than a normal life, as his desire was to become stronger. Soon, the agent said he would continue to train him, as long as the protagonist went to school first. And that's how one friendship led to another. 3 years later, Kim had graduated and then joined the South Korean Armed Forces. Despite being quite young, he proved his worth through his effort. After all, in other words, he had been trained for this moment, since he escaped from the laboratory. But now the protagonist wants to leave his past behind and focus on the present. After all, he wants to become as strong as possible to find Cha Tae-hwan again and discover the truth about them. However, for that, Kim concludes that he will have to conduct an investigation to gather more information. In the midst of this, the masked figure manages to connect with the protagonist. Soon, Kim asks what he wants this time. The masked figure says that his goal is to help Kim in his games, and if he is smart enough, he can reward him with information or exclusive benefits. However, he warns the protagonist not to try to seek private or governmental organizations behind his back. He claims to be one of the 10 most skilled hackers in the world. Therefore, there is nothing he cannot manipulate at will, in addition to obtaining any information he desires. With that, the protagonist concludes that reaching Cha Tae-hwan will not be easy. Therefore, he will have to use the game to his advantage. In this case, he will need to agree, for now, with the crazy administrator. Thus, he intends to be crazier than the game's owner. Therefore, he asks what the next mission is. The administrator says he likes the way the protagonist acts. He then asks if the protagonist knows his roommate well. He also says he would like to see them working together on a mission. In the midst of this, Waran enters the protagonist's room, and the administrator says it would be fun to see that. For her part, Waran realizes she arrived at a bad time. After all, she saw the protagonist changing. So, she pretends and leaves his room. But to her surprise, Kim runs after her. What Waran thinks might be an attempt at punishment. Thus, she begins to apologize. However, Kim holds her hand and asks her to join him in the game, as a team. Waran agrees right away. After all, she had already suggested something like that, so she says she is looking forward to it. However, she has one condition for accepting. She says that if they are going to work together, Kim will have to trust her, no matter what happens. Sometime later, the two end up at a bus stop. Waran comments that she has never worked in a team before. Soon, the protagonist asks if she wants to back out. She says no and insists she is doing this because she wants to. Then, she hands a tracking device to Kim. After that, the bus arrives at the stop. However, the driver is wearing a mask and tells them to get in and put on their masks as well. Therefore, the protagonist does as instructed. Not only him, but Waran does too. Before continuing the journey, the driver says he hopes everyone has a good night's sleep. With that, gas is released inside the vehicle, and everyone ends up falling asleep. Sometime later, a voice says that the participants can now take off their masks and warns that the game will begin soon. The first thing the protagonist saw after that was a cramped space filled with people. The host approaches and says that the game will be a survival game, and that they have been organized into teams at each station. He also says that during the game, it would be better if they do not reveal who their teammates are, as the game will last about 10 days. During this time, they will have to survive the challenges and even betray each other. Then, the host hopes that the betrayal among them will be entertaining. The host warns that all weapons and belongings are being confiscated, the facilities have been prepared, and everyone will wear the same clothes. Before the game starts, he explains the rules and asks everyone to listen carefully. With that, he explains that the game will be played in 10 periods of 12 hours each, totaling 10 days. Each day, the player will have 12 hours to acquire resources and survive. The ways to acquire resources will be shown on the screen. Those who manage to betray others will receive 2 billion wons, and those who are betrayed will lose 1 billion. In other words, they need to communicate with each other without others noticing, and they can betray their team or fully trust their partner. The host says that everything can be done inside dark boxes installed in 4 different locations, where all participants must enter the box once before the end. With so many rules, some participants begin to feel confused. In any case, the host says that the game will start now and hopes to see the survivors again after the 10 days. With that, he gives the signal for the start of the game. Soon, rabid dogs approach, and the host says this is the challenge of the first day, surviving the attack of these furious animals. Some participants are caught completely off guard. The dogs that have been trained for this begin to attack, and those who cannot run in time are the first to be attacked. One participant sees a member of his team being attacked. However, he thinks there is no way to save him without revealing that they are allies. After all, it was said that it was better to keep discretion about this. He also knows that if he does nothing, his partner will suffer intense pain, and he will be at a disadvantage right at the beginning of the game. With all this, he is unsure how to react. In the end, he thinks his only alternative is to play the game alone. After all, he believes that humans should not trust each other, and sarcastically he thanks his partner for serving as bait. However, the dogs are not satisfied with just one target, so soon after, they begin to chase the other participants. With that, it doesn't take long for the structure of many teams to be shaken, and in the end, it becomes every man for himself. Those who are supposed to be team leaders just watch as others fight for survival. The way they have to protect themselves are the black boxes scattered throughout the scene. Through them, it is possible to request help, like a weapon, for example. But not only that, it is also possible to select a specific target and pay the amount that the system charges to then eliminate the target. For some people, as long as the pain is not inflicted on them, nothing else matters but victory. However, the protagonist does not act thinking this way. Upon seeing this whole situation unfold, he decides to help and attacks the dogs. After helping a girl who is crying desperately, Kim tells her to retreat before more animals approach. By the way, it doesn't take long for that to happen. The dogs approach the protagonist and try to attack him. However, Kim fights against them and tries to prevent them from attacking others. But amidst the attacks, the dogs receive a signal and retreat. The host says that the first day of challenges has come to an end and warns that he will see them again in 12 hours. Sometime later, with 5 minutes left until the next challenge begins, some participants are about to go crazy, consumed by fear. And the danger they thought had ended was still there, just in a different form. One participant holds another weaker one and draws the attention of the others. He asks who this old man's team partner is and threatens to beat him until his team reveals itself. Not only that, but he says that from now on, anyone who enters a box before him will be his personal target. Until suddenly someone speaks up and says that this is dangerous. The guy says that, based on the previous judgment, it is possible that the more participants there are, the greater the chances of survival. So a game like this, everyone will have to work together to limit the attacks from snipers and betrayals, in addition to staying in teams. It is already crazy that the competitors are separating. He argues that the bully can earn 1 billion just by staying in his team. However, the guy with glasses receives a solid punch in response, because the bully claims that 1 billion is not enough and will not be satisfied until he gets the amount he wants. He also says that now that the guy with glasses has spoken up, he will be his first target. But at that moment, the protagonist speaks up and says he has a question. He says he wants to understand why the bully did not retreat with the other dogs. After all, with this behavior, he can only be a dog. When confronted, the bully says that the protagonist is asking to get beaten up. So, he approaches and starts to threaten him. However, Kim slaps him, saying that dogs can't talk. After that, the bully falls after taking a single hit. Soon, the other participants witness the protagonist's strength and become afraid of him. Kim became the most notable participant due to his overwhelming strength, which clearly discouraged the other participants from using force. But behind the scenes, altruistic humans were unstoppable. 11.5 hours after the game started, the participants were divided into several groups. Those who were afraid stayed with the team. Those who were looking for new teammates. The people who managed to betray and attack. And also those who were targets of attacks. But the protagonist is playing his own way. Until, through the black box, he discovers that he was betrayed by his team and is surprised, as he did not expect this. At that moment, Kim thinks that he didn't even make eye contact with Waran after the game started, as he was afraid they would find out they were a team. Until he remembers what Waran asked him, to trust her, no matter what happens. With that, the protagonist thinks that Waran must have some plan in mind, but he has no idea what she is planning. After leaving the black box, the protagonist has no idea what his partner is plotting, nor what her true intentions are. However, he remembers earlier when Waran said that there would be benefits in helping him. So, Kim wonders what exactly she was talking about. He thinks it could be both a good thing and a bad thing. Coming from Waran, anything is possible. But he also considers the possibility that Waran has been deceiving him all this time. At that moment, Kim bumps into his teammate, and she responds to his gaze with just a smile, which only increases his suspicion. Then, Kim resigns himself to the fact that there is no way to know Waran's strategy until the game is over. Therefore, instead of dwelling on it, he decides to keep playing. And with luck, he might end up winning, whatever Waran's strategy is. Kim still feels that he is being used, especially seeing Waran's strange behavior. There are only 10 minutes left for the participants to enter the boxes. And after that, the game field will become a real war zone. In light of this, some teams start to fight among themselves. After all, some of them discovered that they were betrayed by their teammates. Soon, those 10 minutes turned into complete chaos. Even though he enjoys watching this happen, time runs out, and the host ends the first day of the game. Then, he asks the participants to move on to the next room. Regardless of this, the trust between some teams has been shaken, and they cannot leave until the game is over. Some can barely look each other in the face, as distrust has shaken them. However, to make matters worse, the next game room simulates a prison, where participants from the same team will be confined together in the same cell. The host says that this is the designated area for players to take care of their personal needs and sleep after the matches end. In this place, violent behavior is prohibited during the 20-hour waiting period after the game ends. Moreover, if they wish to eat, they can buy food here. Some are shocked to learn that they will have to pay for food. After all, they thought they would be fed by the game administration. Not only that, but a single box of basic supplies costs 20 million wons, and a single bottle costs 10 million. Super irritated, some participants claim that this is absurd and try to argue with the administrator. However, he does not listen to them. So, for the hotheads, there is nothing left but to accept the situation as it is. For his part, the protagonist thinks that someone's assets in this game are crucial for survival. And although a single day may not pose a significant problem, going without water for 3 days is dangerous, and the body's ability to cope with challenges decreases rapidly without food. Additionally, a participant who has been betrayed will not be able to ingest anything, even if they win 100 million wons tomorrow, which makes the overall situation even more dangerous. Amid these thoughts, he and the others notice that there is a black box there as well, which means that the same thing happening outside can also occur in the lodging. The host himself states that there are no restrictions on using the box inside and tells the participants to organize with their teams to prepare for tomorrow. Kim knows that to ensure survival, trusting someone becomes essential. Consequently, the participants who wanted to form teams naturally gathered near the boxes, while others observed their actions. Individual participants, in an effort to sow confusion, engaged in alternating conversations with as many people as possible, repeating the process of entering and exiting the boxes countless times while actively forming teams. Participants looking for teams could send a team request using a button inside the box. The other person would then confirm and accept. By forming a team, this structure allowed them to maintain some level of secrecy. Kim selected the participant from the team request list, who, in his opinion, seemed to pose the least risk of betrayal. At this stage, each player can form a team with whomever they wish, and the other person can accept or decline. The only rule is to keep their teams confidential. The next day, the host announces that the games for days 2 and 3 will take place at the following location, and the rules remain the same as the previous day. He also states that, in today's game, each participant must burn at least 20,000 calories. The calories consumed are automatically measured in real time by the device, and participants who do not meet the minimum requirement will face separate penalties. After 6 hours, participants who barely ate or drank water were on the verge of fainting, until someone appeared with water and food, claiming that he bought in bulk and will distribute it to those who accept his proposal. He says that once the game ends, there will be no betrayal or sniping during the waiting time, and during the 12 hours in the waiting room, there is no way to earn money. So if there are no teams to betray at the moment, and no information to sabotage another team, everyone will have to endure the challenges of the third day while starving. He also mentions that some must already be at their limit, so instead of continuing like this, it would be better to ally with him and survive to play another game. Without even hearing the entire proposal, some accept. After all, the desperation for water and food is so great that, at this point, they aren't thinking clearly. Then, the player says he will reveal his plan to his new allies. He wants to target the participants most weakened by the lack of water and food. Then, he wants to convince them to form teams with his allies at a prearranged time. At that moment, the plan was to shoot both simultaneously. This way, he would gain 300 million won in a single move. The player believes that if he persuades them by saying he will use that money to buy food again, they will have no choice but to accept this proposal. Some time passed, and the second day ended, marking the beginning of the third day. Meanwhile, the protagonist tries to survive without consuming water or food during this entire time. On the second day, Kim tried to form a team with a player he judged to be weaker than him, but ended up being betrayed and, as a result, was left without supplies. Even being quite resilient, the protagonist realizes he won't last much longer if he continues like this. Amidst this, someone appears with a bottle of water. Surprisingly, Waran shows up with the water and asks what the protagonist is doing. She says that Kim is a great fighter and has enough skills to survive the games. After all, he is a former military combatant. Waran tells him not to be friendly with anyone inside, as the others will not be friendly with him. After all, everyone only wants one thing: money. When the next game was about to start, the host presented 4 knives to the participants, claiming that they could use the knives to eliminate each other and loot the belongings of the fallen. Immediately, some wicked individuals became extremely excited and rushed to the counter to arm themselves. It doesn't take long for everyone to start cutting each other, and the weaker ones are the first targets. Amidst this, one of the armed men heads towards Waran, but when attempting to attack what appeared to be a defenseless woman, he is surprised by her counterattack, as Waran is skilled enough to stop him. Not only that, but she takes the knife for herself, saying that surviving this game will be easy. On the other side, a player pleads not to be stabbed. However, the one threatening him claims to be doing only what is necessary to survive, despite his face saying otherwise. The player with the knife, consumed by greed, ends up stabbing his prey mercilessly. After all, he only thinks about the gains he will have by doing this. Then, he looks around for his next victim until he spots Waran, but he is startled to see that she has a knife in her hands and is covered in blood. Waran claims that she decided to embrace the dirt. Frightened, the player says they don't need to fight each other, as they both have knives and can go after those who are unarmed. However, Waran argues that cleaning the world of trash like him is her job, and with a single blow, she deals with the situation, not giving any reaction time to his opponent. Not far from there, the protagonist is horrified by the situation he sees, for a girl is being threatened by one of the armed men. But soon after, Waran appears, much to the young woman's luck, and once again, with just one strike, she eliminates her target. However, she claims she didn't do it to save her. Right after that, another armed man approaches, and tries to catch Waran off guard. However, he is the one who ends up being surprised, for with a punch, he was thrown to the other side of the room. Kim has finally started to fight, and tells Waran that this is his way of thanking her for the help, something Waran likes to hear. However, seeing the two together, some participants deduce that Waran and Kim are on the same team. Not only that, but they notice that all the knives are with her. Therefore, they think it's better to deal with this situation once and for all, before they become her next targets. The host watches all of this from afar and laments, for the game time ended when the match was at its peak. It is undeniable that the two most prominent players among the others are in trouble. Besides that, after so many casualties, only 21 players remain. After catching their breath for a brief moment in prison, it's time for another game. The next match consists of endurance, where the participants will be tested to their limits. Some of them are locked in a room with a high temperature for over 4 hours, while others are placed in a compulsory Russian roulette, where the winner takes 400 million. The loser will be eliminated forever. For some, this becomes a nightmare, but for others, it is seen as an opportunity, since at this point, a simple bottle of water is seen as gold. Those who have nothing humiliate themselves before those who have plenty, and even so, they are not rewarded accordingly. In the end, when the situation demanded that people take on even greater debts to stay alive, most participants found it hard to maintain their sanity. As people gradually approached their limits and rationality succumbed to instincts, a new judgment unfolded. Sometime later, the host appears to announce the 6th day of the game. He explains that, in the next match, the participant with the highest assets will be designated as the witch. If the witch is hunted down and successfully eliminated, each participant will be rewarded with 500 million, or they may end up looking like her during the hunting process. After that, the host reveals that the witch is none other than Waran, the participant who, up to this point, is doing the best in the game. She herself is taken by surprise by this. Anyway, the host says they must eliminate the witch for everyone to be saved. However, some recognize Waran from previous games and know it won't be easy to defeat her. But they also know that to win, some sacrifice is necessary. So, they begin to strategize to try to defeat the witch. Soon, the host says the game is about to begin, and Waran has once again become the center of attention. For her part, she says she is surrounded by a bunch of trash and claims that her duty is to get rid of trash like them. Therefore, she says that if they come at her, they must be well aware of the consequences, as she will not go easy on anyone. Even with these words, Waran cannot convince anyone to back down, as greed has blinded them. Waran is a competent hunter. However, she thinks that, unlike before, she is not armed, as everything from the previous game was confiscated. Even her opponents say that, despite being quick, she is one against many guys. With that, they believe they can win. However, the protagonist speaks up, claiming he won't let anyone touch Waran. But in that moment, he realizes he almost revealed that they are on the same team. Trying to disguise it, he claims he is furious and hungry. So, to vent, he will take out his anger on them. Even so, the others have already realized that Kim and Waran are together. With no alternatives, they conclude that they will have to fight against the two to win. Thus, a brutal game for survival begins, where being on the side of the majority means crushing the minority to survive. However, the protagonist sees himself as someone indifferent, and who does not care about his enemies. Soon, he thinks that the worst decision the others made was turning him into a target, for he will not go easy on anyone. With that, it doesn't take long for Kim to beat up everyone who approaches. On the other side, all those who are struck by the protagonist come to a similar conclusion, that Kim has abnormal strength and that, by playing this game, he tips the scales. The last man standing doesn't even need to be hit to reach the same conclusion. Even so, the protagonist does not consider leaving him out of the party. Kim charges into the attack, and knocks down his opponent with a single punch. Then he says he feels good dealing with so many bad guys. But looking around, he realizes that Waran is surrounded. Even so, she does not back down from the fight. When attacked, Waran retaliates, hitting the men in their weakest spots. They try to attack all at once in an attempt to stop her. However, Waran's combat experience gives her a huge advantage over her opponents. Not only that, but an experienced hunter like Waran knows exactly where to strike her prey. Seeing this, the others are horrified. Waran says that, although she is unarmed, a woman like her knows how to use what she has to defend herself. She then states that attacking her with empty hands is a death sentence for any of them. However, the enemies see no other alternative but to continue fighting. For his part, Kim realizes that Waran can take care of herself and notes that he worried for nothing. Irritated, one of the enemies says he will not give up his 500 million. Then he wishes for Waran to perish soon. But she says that for that to happen, they will have to try much harder. Using her nails like claws, she easily cuts through her enemies. On the other side, the protagonist also uses his fists to defeat the opponents. As a result, it doesn't take long for both of them to defeat all those who rose against them. After it ends, the host says that the witch hunt is over, and all those who volunteered lost the game. Therefore, instead of winning, they lost 500 million as punishment, which left no one satisfied. The host says that in this game, it's win or lose. Thus, accepting the outcome is the cost of participating in the game. After the end of the 6th day of games, the games of the 7th, 8th, and 9th days were completed without anyone volunteering to participate. In addition to being exhausted, the participants also do not want to face opponents much stronger than themselves. However, in the end, the participants lean more towards forming alliances, betrayal, and mutual pursuit. Waran also carried out attacks as if she had a complete understanding of each team member. She highlighted and criticized those involved in irregularities. When asked how she could accurately know the team's composition, she replied that hunters do not miss subtle human reactions. She says she observed the range of movements of individuals, tracked their conscious gazes and facial expressions, including trembling hands and cold sweat, changes in body tension, alterations in speech patterns, gestures, and everything else. An untrained human cannot control these signals in extreme situations. It is the result of gathering and organizing all this information in her mind. Moreover, Waran used targeted questions during the conversations she had around. However, Kim says that if she had done exactly that while keeping her team, there would have been no problem at all. So he asks why she decided to betray him. Waran says she was just testing what was going on in his head, but realizes that, as always, Kim has a bird brain. He doesn't quite understand the comparison, but the difference in their bank balances reveals who is the smarter one between them. Waran claims that, even slowly, with a little more time around her, Kim can learn a few things. In any case, the protagonist knows that if it weren't for her, he wouldn't have survived. So he thanks her for the help. With that, Waran says the game is not over yet, and claims she can still betray him until the end. However, Kim says he doesn't care and that he will trust her more from now on. Impressed, she says she just wants to see how this will work out. Sometime later, the moment of the final game arrives. The host congratulates all those who made it this far. Then he reveals the final challenge, saying that to successfully escape this place, the last challenge they must face is to obtain forgiveness for their acts of betrayal, and for that, they must hold hands with the devices nearby for 10 seconds. For the forgiveness to be counted, from now on, the participant who was betrayed receives the authority to forgive or not forgive the one who betrayed them. One of the participants asks what happens if the participant who is supposed to grant forgiveness is already dead. In that case, the host claims that the act of forgiveness is impossible, as someone who is dead is incapable of forgiving. Thus, participants who do not obtain forgiveness will have to remain there until the second stage of the game. Upon hearing this, one of the participants becomes desperate, as he does not want to spend even one more minute inside. He then goes to his team member and tries to force the girl to grant forgiveness. However, she is upset about being betrayed and tries to pull back. As a result, the young man ends up being taken down, for the host says that forgiveness must be genuine and cannot be forced. In fact, this rule applies to everyone. It doesn't take long for some to realize that, from the beginning, they were being manipulated by the rules of the game. Meanwhile, some begin to beg for forgiveness from their teammates, as they know the consequences of staying there. However, for the same reason, some demand payment for forgiveness, asking for high amounts. After all, being betrayed is not something easy to forgive for some. Moreover, it is almost common sense that, if it weren't for this situation, the traitors wouldn't have asked for forgiveness for what they did. And even knowing they could die if they don't forgive, some prefer that to giving in to those who betrayed them before. Apparently, everyone is having difficulty convincing each other about forgiveness. Waran sees this happening and asks what the protagonist thinks. Kim says that, for him, money is not more important than living. So, if it came to that, he would pay for forgiveness. He also knows that Waran sees the other participants as trash, and asks if she thinks the same of the organizers. Waran says yes, as she sees no difference between those who play or organize the matches. The protagonist then extends his hand and tells her to help him clean the world of this trash. She asks why he wants to do that. Kim says that, amidst this pile of trash, there is someone specific he wishes to find. Upon hearing this, Waran asks if that's all. She pulls the protagonist closer, and says she is eager to work as his partner. For the protagonist, although Waran's voice showed joy, her gaze suggests a hint of sadness. After the final game is completed, the 10th day also comes to an end. In this, the participants who were not forgiven ended up being taken by the game administration to an unknown place. The other participants were freed and managed to survive. Although initially everyone started with their respective teams, the relationships were shaken throughout the game, and only one entire team managed to survive, maintaining their initial relationship. Thus, the 10 most intense days of many of their lives came to an end. Back home, the protagonist sits down to eat after a shower, and for the first time after leaving the game, he has a decent and complete meal. After 10 days of not eating properly, this food seems to be the best compared to what he would normally have. Not only does he have this perception, but Waran comes to the same conclusion, as she also did not eat well inside. Kim was responsible for ordering the food and decided to ask for something simple yet tasty, instead of something very sophisticated. Soon, after eating a lot after the ordeal, the two feel more relieved. However, Waran says she suggested ordering omakase for dinner and asks why he chose something simpler. Kim says he simply wanted to eat good old homemade food. Changing the subject, Waran asks what he intends to do from now on. The protagonist says he doesn't plan to participate in games for now, so he wants to focus on recovering his physique and gathering information in the meantime. His roommate asks if the information he needs is about the person mentioned earlier. Kim says yes, which piques Waran's curiosity. She says the protagonist can give some characteristics of this person, and she can help find him. The protagonist also offers to help Waran with whatever she needs, as he feels he owes her after what happened in the game. But now he says he has other matters to attend to, like answering a persistent call from someone who has been looking for him for some time. After stepping away, the protagonist answers the call from his system and asks what the masked figure wants with him. The masked figure says he enjoyed watching the game and asks if Kim and Waran gained more trust in each other. Kim tells him not to beat around the bush and get straight to the point. The masked figure says he has the ability to obtain real-time information about the player the protagonist is looking for, as one would expect. Likewise, he can also guarantee that he never manages to uncover any relevant information. Therefore, he has a proposal to make. He tells Kim to become the #1 player in the ranking, and if he accepts, he will provide all the information he needs to find his friend, in addition to earning some money. Kim, however, says that the masked figure is just trying to use him for some other crazy game. The masked figure does not deny it, but to encourage him, he says he will give a small piece of information. He says that the ranking is not determined solely by the amount in the account. It includes all assets, such as owned properties and tangible assets. The classification is determined by considering the risk of death or failure when facing other participants in the game. It also states that Kim is in 89th place, and there is still a long way to go. Then, it claims that he will have to push himself a little harder. Kim thinks that, although he still doesn't understand exactly why he ended up in this game, or what the exact purpose is, his decision is already made. Upon encountering Cha Tae-hwan again, and understanding the connection between his past and this game, he has witnessed how human lives are treated as mere toys. Any notion of quick profit or giving up has evaporated, so he accepts the challenge. After all, this time, he wants to play not for the gains, but to put an end to this madness. The masked man says he knew the protagonist would accept, and is eager to get started. 2 days later, in a luxurious location, at the recent stage of the hottest retro singer, named High-One, she sings for a few clients, as she works in adult entertainment, for people who can afford her services. But it is clear, without her face, that she does not enjoy doing this. Not only that, but she works under the influence of medication, as that is the only way she can endure such a hectic routine. Her agent, nicknamed JG, knows that High-One becomes more susceptible when medicated, not caring at all about her integrity, only about the profits she generates for him. In turn, High-One wonders if this will ever end. Reflecting on her past, she realizes she has been haunted by sadness since childhood. Her father left her with overwhelming debts before taking his own life, so High-One spent her childhood under the care of a mother who lived drunk. The child, deprived of love at home, was left with a mark, and that mark became a target, creating countless wounds throughout her growth. Even with all this, she managed to overcome, as she forgot her problems through music. Despite her mother having scorned her dream, and never having been recognized at school, High-One fought desperately to live, all driven only by the will to achieve her dream. She believed she needed nothing else in her life besides her greatest goal. Not only that, but she thought that only by realizing her dream would she find any joy in life. High-One wondered if that was asking too much from life. Moreover, she did not understand why she was mistreated by the people around her, and why the world had to be so cruel. After all, love was denied to her. All her memories are filled with nightmares, which only distanced her from her dream. High-One thought that if she had money, she could change things in her favor and did not want her financial situation to interrupt her achievement. After receiving many no's in life, she finally got an opportunity to make money, but now she is suffering the consequences. Back in the present, someone knocks on the door of the room where she is with some men. Disguised as a waiter, the protagonist enters, and asks if this is where they ordered fruit. Irritated, one of the guys says that the protagonist is interrupting and did not order any fruit. But inside, Kim identifies his target, JG, the girl's agent. Kim does his best to stay inside. In an attempt to expel him, one of the men is the first to be hit. Sometime later, JG's security guards are all taken down. He says that his favorite toy was taken by a guy who came out of nowhere. Upon hearing this, his superior is incredulous. He says he wants to see this man in person, then sends some of his men to find him as quickly as possible. At home, Waran prepares dinner, and is making pork with fried rice, something the protagonist likes a lot, and she knows that. Upon hearing him open the door, quickly, Waran goes to greet him, saying she is preparing his favorite dish. However, she is surprised to see Kim carrying a girl in his arms. But what catches Hwa-ran's attention is not the fact that the girl is unconscious, but that she is beautiful. Jealous, she asks Kim who this woman is. After being carried into the protagonist's house, Ha-won wakes up not knowing where she is, and immediately sees two strangers staring at her. In any case, she does not make a scene. Instead, she accepts a drink and claims not to remember what happened clearly. She only knows that Kim entered the place where she works and took her out of there, so she thinks he is a detective or something like that. Kim confirms and claims to have found her while on a mission. For her part, Hwa-ran finds this act ridiculous and thinks that no one would believe it. 10 minutes earlier, Hwa-ran confronted the protagonist, saying that he brought a woman to his house who isn't even a participant. The protagonist said that this girl was in danger, but in a crime scene, he couldn't let the police handle it, as it would be dangerous for her. He also mentioned that as soon as the girl calmed down, he would listen to her story to piece together the missing parts before jumping to conclusions. Then, she asked if Kim was going to play detective. He said that wasn't a bad idea. Back in the present, Ha-won bought into the idea that she was facing a detective. He said that at the moment, he was gathering clues about someone he needed to capture, and for that, he needed to ask some questions. Kim told Ha-won to talk only about all the injustices she suffered related to the criminal organization. Ha-won revealed that they had a slavery contract, where apparently the president runs an entertainment agency. Even after discovering that he was linked to a criminal organization, Ha-won saw no way out, as she was bound to them by contract, just like other young women. They threatened the families of those who tried to leave, so no one dared to report them, besides the fact that they used drugs to make the girls more susceptible. Not only that, but they also had compromising recordings of anyone who might try to escape or harm them. However, the protagonist told Ha-won not to worry about that, as he had taken the phones of everyone who was at the scene, and he took the opportunity to delete all the photos and videos that were on the devices. Ha-won asked how he managed to do that. Kim said he had his ways, but now he needed to access the girl's phone and asked for permission, claiming it was important for his investigation. At this point, Ha-won already trusted the protagonist and handed her phone to him. The protagonist had a feeling they would try to track Ha-won, and when he looked at her phone, he confirmed his suspicions. Ha-won herself didn't know this and realized she was more trapped than she had imagined. With that, Hwa-ran asked what the protagonist was going to do now. Kim said he had a plan, and he revealed that he would use the fact that they were tracking the girl's phone to his advantage. Hwa-ran agreed but still remained suspicious about whether it would work or not. Sometime later, Kim went to an abandoned warehouse. It didn't take long for the criminals to track the phone's location. However, they weren't naive, and given where they were, they already suspected that something bad might happen. In any case, they didn't even consider the possibility of backing down. After all, besides revenge, they were there on orders from their superior. With that, one of them went to the entrance, and with a kick, he opened the door, saying he finally found the one who was hiding. But the criminals were surprised by what they saw, for instead of being hidden, Kim and Ha-won were standing in front of them, as if they were waiting for someone to arrive. For his part, the protagonist said he wasn't a barbarian like them, much less would he tie innocent people against their will. Judging by the protagonist's actions, the criminals deduced that he belonged to a rival gang, but Kim denied it. However, he was waiting for the leader of the criminals to show up for the party. After all, he had business to discuss only with him. This only increased the criminal's suspicion that the protagonist was a rival. Kim realized this was very important to them, so he decided to play along, and said he belonged to the diving gang. However, the criminals noticed that the protagonist wasn't being serious, and got irritated thinking he was making fools of them. Soon, it didn't take long for them to launch an attack. The leader of the thugs thought there was no way a clean-handed guy could defeat all his armed men. But it didn't take long for him to think otherwise, for he saw with his own eyes his men falling one by one. Not only that, but he was also the only one left standing. Automatically, he became the next target of the protagonist. As he approached, Kim asked if the thug would resist longer this time or if he would go down right at the beginning, just like last time. Before getting beaten, the thug backed away and said he didn't need this. Then, Kim said he had some questions. First, he wanted to rectify the mistakes the thug had made. So, he told him to apologize to Ha-won for the harm he caused her. Surprised, the thug asked if that was what all this was about. He said he hadn't done anything wrong, just helped a desperate girl achieve her dream, so she should be grateful for the help she received. Ha-won couldn't bear to hear such nonsense about herself and began to cry. But then, the protagonist approached and told her to open her eyes. He hands a bat to Ha-won, saying that holding it will make her more confident. Kim also tells her to take out her frustrations on the one who made her suffer. At that moment, Ha-won remembers that she initially didn't think she would be working for a criminal, but rather for someone who would help her achieve her dream. However, over time, the one who seemed to be a kind and gentle boss showed, through his actions, to be the opposite. Therefore, Ha-won concludes that she never wants to go through something like that again, and also doesn't want to feel fear anymore. Seeing Ha-won approach with the bat, the criminal panics and tries to convince her not to do it. In an attempt to escape, he ends up tripping and falling to the ground. Now, he is completely vulnerable to attacks. However, Ha-won strikes the ground intentionally instead of her target. Even in anger, she is not that cruel and simply says that she is not a money-making machine. Kim approaches and tells Ha-won to let him take care of the rest. He hands the criminal's phone to him and tells him to call his boss, saying that he has been captured. After cornering the criminal and leaving him tied up like a hostage, the protagonist instills a bit of terror in his target. Terrified, the criminal remembers that not long ago the protagonist said he was not a barbarian who ties people up. Kim says he is right. Then, after bizarrely changing his expression, he says he is no longer the person he was before. For this type of criminal, money is everything, as they can buy whatever they want with the right amount, including power, which only increases each individual's internal greed. Therefore, they will do anything to get what they want, even playing with the feelings of vulnerable people. Not only that, but sometimes they even mock those same people. However, this time, the appropriate punishment is being applied. Kim says that people like this always deserve to be punished. Then, he uses his bat as he sees fit, and softens his target enough, until he agrees to say everything the protagonist wants to know. Surprised, Kim says he has barely started and his target is already ready to talk. He wants to know which organization the criminal belongs to, and the latter says that the name of his organization is Big Blue, an organization that operates in the illegal drug market. In addition to manufacturing and selling products, they also eliminate any competing group that enters into conflict in their territory. Not only that, but to maintain total control, they sometimes distribute new free products in nightclubs, just to attract new customers. After hearing this, Kim asks where the lab is located. The criminal hesitates to answer, so the protagonist asks if he will have to continue with his bat massage session. In turn, the criminal claims not to know. With that, the protagonist says he will help him think of a better answer. Sometime later, in the underground lab, the employees hear a strange noise coming from outside, until the protagonist enters the place and says they are in serious trouble. One of the manufacturers asks who the protagonist is and what he is doing there. Kim says the answer is easy to guess. After all, he has already taken down all of the men who were outside. With that, the manufacturer asks if the protagonist is the man who recently attacked his organization. The protagonist says yes and claims to be looking for the head of the organization, and he has also sent the location of the criminal he captured. Upon hearing this, the manufacturer realizes that the several men sent to rescue the girl who was captured actually fell into a trap. Not only that, but they left some locations unprotected. Kim says that is exactly what he wanted. The men the manufacturer mentioned went to a certain container, but they did not find who they were looking for, as instead of the girl, they only found the criminal that Kim captured. The protagonist reveals that he sent them there and used bait to distract them. Still confused and scared, the manufacturer tries to back away, but soon Kim hits him hard. On the other hand, the guys he took down before entering woke up faster than Kim expected. Not only that, but the henchmen are using the same drugs manufactured there to stay more alert during work, which is why their reactions are quicker than normal. Kim realizes that they are not clean, and also notices that this type of drug is not common, as it seems to remove the user's fear, to the point where they feel invincible and are willing to do anything. Moreover, they also become a bit stronger. Now that they are prepared, they begin to attack. So, the protagonist has no choice but to fight. However, even with all that extra vigor, Kim takes them down easily. But unlike what would normally happen, the henchmen fall and get back up quickly. Kim then thinks he just needs to keep knocking them down until they can't get up anymore. Soon, everyone who approaches is taken down before they can even retaliate. Amidst this, something that was impossible ends up happening. The one who should be incapable of feeling fear due to the drugs becomes frightened nonetheless, standing before an opponent like the protagonist, and this leaves him vulnerable to the protagonist's attacks. After defeating all the henchmen again, the protagonist goes to the back of the lab. Behind a locked door, he finds other girls in the same situation he found Hai-1 for the first time. They are also under the influence of drugs and barely have the strength to ask for help. Kim then tells them to wait just a little longer, as he will get them all out soon. But after that, he is surprised by an enemy who sneaks up on him. He is attacked by the villain. However, he manages to defend himself in time. This guy is the type who attacks first and asks questions later. Thus, he asks the protagonist who he is. To the protagonist, at first glance, his opponent is clearly insane. His strength is enough to crush a bat. Kim concludes that if the enemy lands a punch, he could break 1 or 2 ribs. After all, his strength and mental state are far from normal. In that case, he will have to go all out too, as soon as the enemy charges. The protagonist counters and doesn't even wait to be hit. With a single swing, he pushes the opponent back, leaving him disoriented. Sarcastically, Kim says that must have cleared the big guy's mind. He also says that the opponent thought he could ruin people's lives and have fun forever. After all, people like that think everyone is just a gold mine and that they could live at the expense of others' suffering. But Kim asserts that this ends now, as he will put an end to this kind of despicable mentality. Irritated, the opponent charges again. Soon, the protagonist gets what he wanted from the start, to throw him off balance. With that, he takes the opportunity to attack the villain as much as possible. Kim claims that rehabilitation for this type of person is impossible. So, the solution is quite simple: shock treatment. With that, he calms the big guy down significantly. But after knocking the guy out, he realizes he forgot to ask who he worked for. Next, the protagonist receives a call and answers. On the other end, Waran says she has already taken care of things over there. She just didn't meet with the head of the organization. Kim is curious to know if she is okay, and Waran confirms that she is. Then, he praises her for the good work and says he will keep looking until the big boss shows up. Amidst this, one of the girls says that the leader of the organization has an underground facility. She also says that a few hours ago, a man appeared, took her friend, and brought her to the basement. Soon, she asks the protagonist for help to save her. In the basement of the clandestine lab, a man armed with a sword holds one of the girls hostage. Not only that, but he is testing a new product on her, and says that this is the strongest one yet. However, a bodyguard says they have a problem, because the men sent to rescue the hostage have not made contact, and the crazy guy who attacked them must have taken them down. The thug does not like being interrupted at all. He reminds them that he warned them about this, and says he told his henchman that if he was interrupted again, he would eliminate him. However, right after the henchman is taken down, the protagonist appears and asks if the villain is having fun. Kim says he heard that his opponent was an impressive ranker, but seeing him now, he claims that he is not much different from the bald guy he defeated earlier. For his part, the enemy says he was wondering who attacked his organization and now understands, as he realizes that the protagonist is also a player. Kim confirms that he is a participant in the games, and finally standing before his target, he says he is there to hunt him down. With that, they both attack each other. The enemy says that the protagonist charged in even knowing he has a katana and finds that quite interesting. They both start fighting, giving it their all. And for the enemy, this is quite enjoyable, as he is facing an opponent worthy of him. But he claims that facing a man with a sword is a mistake, and asserts that he will cut the protagonist into pieces before eliminating him once and for all, because that's more fun. However, Kim says he will show his opponent what real fun is. He uses the shock from his gloves combined with his baseball bat, and so, he launches an attack dubbed shock treatment. His opponent even tries to defend himself with his katana. However, even though he is not hit directly, he receives the shock, precisely because he is holding a metal object. The protagonist says that must have hurt. He himself receives a bit of the electrifying charge, enough to carry the shock from his gloves. But it doesn't take long for his enemy to get back up. After that, he says that judging by the protagonist's actions, he is probably insane. Then, he intends to even the playing field by injecting his newest product into himself. Seeing this, Kim says that an addict always follows the same pattern, as they always think that using more drugs will solve their problems. In turn, the enemy asks if the protagonist is curious to know how he became the head of this organization and a high-level ranker. Kim says he has no curiosity and attacks him, but his opponent manages to counterattack, this time without his katana. He says he only got to where he is because his fists are strong. At this point, he starts punching the protagonist, leaving Kim disarmed in the process. Despite still having the gloves, he wonders where so much strength in his opponent's fist came from. The enemy says that the protagonist has apparently played quite a bit, but he claims to have much more experience than any novice. After all, he is someone who has left the game and decided to return of his own free will. Upon learning this information, Kim is quite surprised, as he has never heard of anyone doing that. The villain says he paid $2 billion to leave, so Kim asks why he decided to come back. He simply replies that after living an intense life as a player, he couldn't adjust to a normal life again, so he decided to return to his player routine. Just as people become addicted to drugs, he became addicted to adrenaline. When the brain feels pleasure, it craves greater stimuli. For him, playing with others is the most fun, especially when he takes down those who are weaker. The enemy attacks, and Kim manages to defend himself. However, he notices that his opponent has a high destructive power. Not only that, but he realizes he is fighting someone who seems to be an ex-boxer. By a hair, the protagonist avoids being hit by a punch, but as he dodges, he ends up exactly where his opponent wanted him. Soon, the enemy does not hold back and attacks Kim from various directions. Kim feels the force of the blows, until the moment he is thrown to the other side of the environment. Sarcastically, his enemy asks if he is having fun too. He also asks if the protagonist has ever felt what it's like to eliminate someone with his own fists. Kim says that maybe today will be his first time. Then, his enemy says that he himself has done that 14 times, and is eager to increase that number. With that, he attacks relentlessly and tries to hit the protagonist in any way possible. However, Kim lets his opponent get close on purpose. Meanwhile, he was charging the shock from his gloves to land a single charged punch, but to his surprise, the enemy does not fall like the first time. Not only that, but the enemy counterattacks with a headbutt. He says that the protagonist is providing him with a lot of fun. Kim then asks how long he plans to have fun. With that, the enemy realizes that the protagonist did not feel his attack. His surprise left him vulnerable, and he took a right hook right on the chin. Even so, the enemy did not fall. However, he wonders how the protagonist did not feel the effect of his headbutt. Until then, he did not think anyone could remain standing after taking a hit like that. So, he wishes to eliminate the protagonist more than ever. At this point, he returns with his punches, but Kim protects himself from all of them. However, the enemy claims that he won't be able to do that for long. Amid so many taunts, Kim responds with a strike aimed at the enemy's eyes. Quickly, the enemy dodges at the last second. However, he notices that the protagonist is faster than before. Kim approaches the enemy and hits him with an electric punch once again. But now, the enemy feels the blow. The villain did not expect such a quick counterattack. Not only that, but Kim surprises him with a grapple and takes his opponent to the ground. Now that he has the bald head disarmed, Kim begins to strike him on the head with his electrifying gloves and does not stop attacking for even a second. While taking a beating like a condemned man, the villain thinks he has never been in a situation like this before. After all, he is used to looking down on people. Not only that, but he always has someone kneeling at his feet, begging for something. He is the one who inflicts pain and holds the lives of others in his hands. But for the first time, he realizes he is facing a near-death situation. Soon, amidst the protagonist's attacks, he tries to argue to stop the fight. Still, Kim does not hold back and finishes the fight. He asks why he should go easy on a worthless person like the bald guy. After that, his system alerts him that he has completed the mission and, moreover, earned a good amount of money. Not only that, but his ranking level in the game has also increased. Quickly, the game's chief administrator congratulates him, saying that now various resources will be available to Kim. As his ranking increases, the matchmaking system for the game and missions changes, and naturally, the risks also rise. Named characters or rankers may target Kim, so the masked one warns him to be careful, as other players might try to take his position in the ranking. However, the protagonist claims that none of this matters. As promised, the masked one must help him find the person he is looking for. In this, the administrator pulls up Cha Tae-hwan's file and says that his codename is 11. The clue he gives to the protagonist is called X. Kim asks what that means. The administrator says that is all for now, and that Kim should take care of the rest on his own. And regarding the warning he gave earlier, he advises Kim to take it more seriously. After a while, Kim rescued 4 people from the basement, before the masked scavengers began the cleanup. He needed help to move the victims to a safe place. So, he decided to call the only trustworthy group he knows, the Liberation Group. Kim told Gu Woon-emo that these people were victims of a criminal group and asked him to escort them safely to their homes. Gu Woon-emo assured him that he would do that. But before that, he asks if Kim has made a decision about what they discussed. The protagonist says yes and claims that he will join the Liberation Group. Kim is starting to rethink his choices. However, for the game administrator, the real big change is about to happen in the world. He believes that the game was created to generate a great conflict. Upon further reflection, he says that all of humanity was created for the same purpose. And he thinks that Kim Joo-hyuk is the central piece of his plans. At this point in the game, the protagonist already has over 2 billion in his account. After acquiring gold bars, jewelry, sports cars, and a luxurious residence, he is living the life he has always wanted. After his last mission, he thought he deserved a break. Therefore, he decided to enjoy a leisure day at a 5-star hotel. But he is not alone. Hwa-ran also wanted to enjoy a bit. She appears and asks why the protagonist is laughing so much. She also says that some dangerous players must already know about him, so she claims that Kim shouldn't be so relaxed. However, he disagrees, arguing that a good rest increases work performance, and says that if Hwa-ran worked in an office, she would know that. At the moment, Kim just wants to set his worries aside and have some fun. He is even thinking about doing this at least once a week from now on. After that, Hwa-ran hands him the sunscreen. Kim says he doesn't need it, but she says it's not for him to use, but rather to help apply it on her. After finishing, Hwa-ran says that he already has 2 billion and unlocked new features in his system, then asks what comes next. Kim says he will probably check what is available in the system stores. Then Hwa-ran claims that he should prepare well for what is to come. She says that the guy the protagonist defeated was a former ranker and someone who left and returned. Thus, she claims that he was lucky that everything ended well, because if he had encountered a current combat ranker, things would have been riskier, even for the protagonist. Anyway, she says there are many useful things in the system store and recommends that he take a look. She usually accesses it directly from her phone, but says the protagonist can access it directly from his glasses. With that, Kim doesn't take long to make the access. As soon as he accesses the store, the system explains how some things work. It presents some equipment, claiming that some are quite exclusive, which is why they are expensive, and as soon as he buys, a drone will deliver it to the player's location. Upon seeing the prices, Kim realizes that the items are quite expensive, and since he doesn't urgently need anything, he decides to wait to buy something he really needs. But before closing the store, he notices something different. A mysterious box, priced at 500 million. Even without knowing the content, Kim decides to buy it, as he couldn't resist his curiosity. While he waits for the drone to bring his order, Gu Woon-emo approaches and asks if he is enjoying his stay. Kim says yes and is surprised that the Liberation Group has a place like this. The old man is happy to hear that, and says Kim can stay as long as he wants. Out of curiosity, Kim asks how much money Gu Woon-emo made from the game. However, the old man says that this comes from before he started playing, as he was already rich and only bets for fun. Kim then asks why he needs the game. Gu Woon-emo explains that his intention is to find a specific person, just like Kim. After all, for him, there are things more important than money. The old man says he has a granddaughter who was put into the game and disappeared shortly after, so his goal is to find her. As Kim already knows, he says that some people are forced into the game. Thus, the intention of the Liberation Group is to live up to its name. Kim says that freeing these people does not eliminate the problem, as its cause needs to be destroyed. With that, the old man asks if he intends to bring down the system. The protagonist says he needs to do that, as only then will this madness come to an end. Gu Woon-emo says this is a nearly impossible fight to win, but he admires Kim's hope. By the way, he sees Hwa-ran watching and asks if they are game partners. Kim says they only have similar goals to hers, but claims that Hwa-ran is not ready to join the Liberation Group yet. Amid this, Kim remembers he has a question to clarify and asks what the old man knows about X. Sometime later, the protagonist ends up in a restricted area. Kim is accompanied by Hwa-ran, as he is following a lead that the old man provided. This is a dangerous place, an abandoned underground market, now used by hunters to hunt players. But as soon as he tries to cross the area, the protagonist realizes that someone arrived first. A muscular, unfriendly guy says he was waiting for the protagonist and also mentions that he has a proposal to make. Kim realizes that this guy was expecting him and asks who he is. Introducing himself, the guy says his name is Rumble, a member of the arena group, while Rand says this is a group of high-level members specialized in combat. Getting straight to the point, Rumble wants to recruit the protagonist for his group. He also says they have a special interest in him and want Kim as a member very much. The protagonist says he is not interested and declines the offer. However, Rumble offers 5 million for the protagonist to join his group. Kim claims he didn't know his work was worth that much money. Nevertheless, despite being passionate about money, he will not sell his principles for a certain amount. Even though he says this, inside, Kim is very tempted to accept the money and then back out of the group. Rumble says that's a shame, as he was ordered to convince the protagonist one way or another. Then, he shows his cell phone and asks if this is convincing enough. Immediately, Kim is stunned to see what Rumble has, as on his cell phone, he reveals that Soo-yeon, the protagonist's co-worker, has been kidnapped and is being held hostage. Kim thinks that since the last incident, he hasn't seen Soo-yeon, as he decided to keep his distance for his own safety, but realizes that this didn't help much. For his part, Rumble says there are various ways to control a person. If a tempting offer is not accepted, it is possible to force them to obey. The protagonist wonders how these guys know so much about him. Rumble says he bought all the information he needed. Then, he has one last proposal to make. He says that when time runs out, the hostage will explode with the bomb, and Kim can try to find her before that. However, if he fails to do so, not only will he lose her, but he will also have to submit to the control of his group. Rumble says the hostage is somewhere in this area and wishes the protagonist good luck in his search. Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.